Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Stephanie Flores Ramirez. Stephanie Flores Ramirez was born on July 22, 1988, to Ricardo Flores and Maria Elena Ramirez. She was a kind and easygoing child. Her family was quite wealthy. Her father was involved in the auto racing industry and was building a successful political career. Stephanie grew up in a prestigious family. Her four brothers were all from the upper class and had access to the best education. Stephanie excelled in school, earning the admiration and respect of her teachers and classmates. In 2008, at the age of 20, Stephanie enrolled at the University of San Martin de Porres to study business administration. By 2010, as a third-year student, she had many great ideas and hopes for her future. Despite her innocent appearance and excellent academic performance, Stephanie knew how to enjoy life with a lot of money at her disposal. She frequented the best nightclubs and casinos in the country. On the night of May 30, 2010, at a casino called Atlantic City, Stephanie met a mysterious man named Joran van der Sloot at around 3 a.m. She sat down at the poker table next to him, and they were instantly attracted to each other. Although they came from different countries, they both spoke fluent English and quickly found common ground. Stephanie was drawn to Joran's confidence and easygoing demeanor, while he was captivated by her beauty and smile. During their conversation, Stephanie asked Joran how he came to Lima. He said he was on vacation to escape some personal troubles. At that time, Stephanie had no idea that his troubles were related to the murder of a woman. Joran deceived her by claiming that he was the son of a wealthy lawyer and judge. This made Stephanie feel safe, as she believed that someone from a wealthy family like hers could not be dangerous. They talked at the poker table late into the night. Stephanie was an experienced gambler, knowing how to assess odds and calculate how to win money. Just a few days earlier, she had won $1 in a game after hours of chatting. They had consumed a considerable amount of alcohol. What started as a casual conversation gradually turned into flirting. Eventually, Joran invited Stephanie to spend the night with him, and to her surprise, she agreed. They went to a hotel in the Miraflores area, where Joran rented a room. There are differing accounts of whether the pair became intimate. Some say they had an intimate encounter, while others claim that Stephanie simply went to his room to continue playing online poker. The details of that night are somewhat unclear, however. It is confirmed that at some point, Stephanie accessed Joran's laptop. Stephanie later learned of Joran's connection to Natalie Holloway's death. She had been lured into a dangerous situation, and now she was trapped with a criminal. Stephanie tried to escape, but was unable to. When Joran realized she had discovered his secret, he became furious. A struggle ensued. He hit Stephanie in the nose with a crowbar, causing her to bleed mercilessly. Joran overpowered her and began strangling her. He then continued to attack her until she stopped breathing. When morning came, Stephanie still hadn't returned home. Her father, Ricardo, grew increasingly worried as time passed. He knew his daughter always came home, which made him fear that something was wrong. He contacted his son, Enrique, for help in finding Stephanie. They called Stephanie's co-workers, but when they found nothing, they contacted the police to report her missing. Ricardo discovered that his daughter had been gambling the night before. Peruvian police then went to Atlantic City to investigate further. There, they reviewed surveillance camera footage of Stephanie playing poker and drinking. During the night, she met a tall young man. The police quickly identified him and obtained his national identification number. From that point on, Joran van der Sloot became the prime suspect in Stephanie's disappearance. It was discovered that the two had left the casino together around 5 a.m. that morning, although their exact destination was initially unclear. It was noted that they were returning to the hotel where Joran was staying. The footage showed the pair entering his hotel room. Hours later, Joran left the room alone, but returned with 2 cups of coffee and a loaf of bread. 3 hours after they entered, Joran left the room again, still alone. As he left, He informed a hotel employee that Stephanie was still in the room, but asked that she not be disturbed as she was only sleeping. On June 2, 3 days after Stephanie's death, and after Joran had checked out, a hotel employee discovered her body in room 309. Police found a tennis racket in the room, believed to be the weapon used in the attack. After verifying the name associated with the room, police confirmed that it was Joran van der Sloot. After leaving the hotel, he left the TV on full volume, possibly creating the illusion that someone was still inside. Police were unable to determine where he went after the crime. In an effort to quickly identify Joran, the police released his information and photo to all media outlets. In further investigation, police learned that Joran van der Sloot was born on August 6, 1987, into a wealthy family. He has 2 older brothers, his mother is an art teacher, and his father has a well-paying job that provides for the family. They live a comfortable life. Enjoying traveling, Joran attends a local international school, where he is a diligent student. He is tall, attractive, and athletic, participating in football and tennis while regularly practicing with his father. Despite doing well in school, Joran was a spoiled brat and a habitual liar. In contrast to his calm older brothers, he displayed arrogant and flamboyant behavior, often sneaking out at night to go to casinos. In 2005, he met an American girl named Natalie Holloway. As their relationship developed, Joran expressed a desire to be intimate with her. When Natalie refused, he became violent and kicked her in the head when she was unconscious. He abused her to cover up his crime. He murdered her. The case of Natalie's disappearance and Joran's involvement attracted international media attention. Maintaining public interest for a decade, Joran was the prime suspect from the beginning. But due to numerous legal issues, he could not be convicted despite repeated interrogations and detentions. How did Joran get to Lima? And where did he get the money for the trip? In fact, he blackmailed Natalie's family, promising to reveal the location of their daughter's body in exchange for cash. After receiving a portion of the money, Joran fled to Lima to pursue his gambling ventures there. At a casino in Atlantic City, he met his second victim, Stephanie, whom he killed on the 5th anniversary of Natalie's death. Joran became the prime suspect in the case, leading to his placement on Interpol's wanted list. Police in neighboring countries were informed of the situation. His whereabouts were soon traced. When he entered Chile via the Chacaluta border, police confirmed that he was in Chile. After tracing him, he was later found after taking a taxi in Vina del Mar, a coastal city. Chilean police arrested him as he was walking toward Santiago. Joran was immediately taken into custody, and the bloodied clothing of the victim, Stephanie, was found in his possession. Initially, Joran denied any involvement in her death, claiming that armed robbers had attacked them in their hotel room. He alleged that when Stephanie refused to cooperate, they killed her. This explanation was seen as an attempt to evade responsibility. On July 5, after Joran was deported to Peru, an official investigation began. He was questioned, and after several days of police interrogation, he realized he had no way out and confessed to the crime. In his written statement, he detailed the events that took place that night. He claimed that he had left the hotel to buy coffee and bread, but when he returned, he discovered that Stephanie was using his computer and that she knew he was involved in Natalie's death. According to Joran, when he tried to explain with Stephanie, she hit him and ran toward the door. He then stopped her. He insisted that he never intended to kill her. However, when she invaded his privacy without permission, he became angry, lost control, and ultimately took Stephanie's life. Joran claimed that he drank coffee laced with an illegal pill, then packed his things and left the hotel. Subsequent toxicology tests showed no trace of any pills in his system, suggesting that he may have used this strategy to reduce his sentence in Peru. Crimes committed under the influence of illegal substances often result in lighter sentences, and it appears that Joran's attorneys were aware of this and sought to exploit it, Joran was subsequently arrested on charges of robbery and first-degree murder. Given the severity of Joran's actions and the wealth of his family, the judge denied his request for bail on the morning of the trial. An angry crowd gathered outside the courthouse, expressing their outrage by throwing fruit and eggs at Joran as he was escorted inside. Joran had previously been held in a maximum security prison in South America, known for its harsh conditions. Where he was constantly monitored, he was offered a chance to be transferred to a prison in Aruba if he revealed the location of Natalie's body. But he refused the offer. Joran's attorneys have argued that Joran lost control during the attack on Stephanie because she took his laptop without permission. If the judge had accepted this argument, Joran could have faced a lighter sentence of only 3 to 5 years in prison, and with good behavior, he might have been released after 20 months. However, these efforts have failed. On January 11, 2012, Joran van der Sloot pleaded guilty to the murder and robbery of Stephanie Flores Ramirez. He was sentenced to 28 years in prison and ordered to pay $75 to Stephanie's family. This marked the end of Stephanie's case. However, Joran's criminal story is not over yet. He was recently extradited to the United States to face charges of extorting Natalie's parents. Concerned that his sentence could be longer than life, he decided to plead guilty. Natalie Holloway's case took a turn when Joran van der Sloot pleaded guilty to extortion and wire fraud. The plea added 20 years to his sentence, which he would have to serve after his release from a Peruvian prison. Although Joran confessed to killing Natalie, he was not punished for that crime. Instead, he was sentenced to a total of 28 years in a Peruvian prison. After serving his sentence, he was transferred to a U.S. prison to serve an additional 20 years for extorting Natalie's family. During this time, little was known about what happened. Notably, Joran's father, who had supported him, died of a heart attack. Although Joran faced a total of 48 years in prison, many felt that this punishment was insufficient given his cruelty. Stephanie and Natalie lived short but vibrant lives, filled with love and the promise of a bright future. Their families and friends are devastated by the loss of their beautiful daughters, sisters, and girlfriends. It is heartbreaking to know that their lives were taken by a criminal with no compassion. If Joran had been incarcerated sooner, with enough evidence against him, Stephanie might still be alive today. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Jordan Worth. Alexander Skeel was born on August 17, 1995, in Kingston upon Hull. He grew up in a loving and supportive family. The boys spent their first months in the hospital in special rooms for premature babies, where they fought against very low body weight. Thankfully, with the help of skilled doctors, the children began to recover. However, Alexander's brother gained weight more quickly, and by their first birthday, he showed almost no signs of being premature. In contrast, Alexander was weaker and dealt with a condition called hydrocephalus, which is the excessive buildup of fluid in the brain, leading to him being classified as disabled. Despite these health challenges from birth, Alexander's intellectual growth was unaffected, and physically, he was similar to his classmates. He even participated actively in sports at school. Their parents adored their sons from a young age, showering them with love and care while investing time and money in their education and overall well-being. After graduating from high school, both brothers enrolled in the prestigious Bedford College to continue their studies. Alexander was intelligent, attractive, and made an effort to go to the gym regularly, which helped him gain attention from women. However, unlike his brother, who actively dated and had a vibrant social life, Alexander was shy and preferred to concentrate on his studies. In college, Alexander experienced love at first sight when he met a stunning girl named Jordan Worth. They were the same age, and Jordan came from a wealthy family. Growing up, she was used to getting what she wanted and rarely faced rejection. She always dressed elegantly, took great care of her appearance, and enjoyed a vibrant social life. Jordan was one of the most popular girls on campus and attracted the attention of many admirers. Besides her studies, she volunteered her time, raising funds and providing aid to local shelters for homeless animals as well as to children facing hunger in Africa. Jordan's efforts to make a positive impact were recognized multiple times. At first, her appeared to be an angel, kind, caring, smart, and beautiful. Alexander fell in love with her instantly but assumed that the outgoing and popular Jordan would never notice him. To his surprise, she was also drawn to him and took the first step to get to know him. Although Jordan was more experienced in relationships, for the shy Alexander, she was his very first love. The couple started dating in 2012 when they were both just 17 years old. Initially, their relationship was thriving. They spent a lot of time together and were nearly inseparable. At college, they were often referred to as the most beautiful couple, which made Jordan feel very flattered. The first 6 months of their relationship were filled with love, romance, and mutual respect. They surprised each other with thoughtful gifts and enjoyed celebrating small but meaningful milestones. Their social media accounts were filled with photos of them together, showcasing their happiness and featuring heartfelt captions and declarations of love. To outsiders, it appeared that they were perfect for each other and destined for a long, happy life together. They quickly decided to move in together and rented an apartment. As they were both still students, their parents provided substantial financial support. Fortunately, their parents were supportive of their relationship. Jordan was particularly fond of Alexander's parents because she came across as a responsible young woman with aspirations to become an art history teacher, leaving a positive impression on everyone she met. As time went on, Jordan's behavior started to change. It began with her increasing demands. Each month, she wanted Alexander to update her on everything he did. She openly checked his personal messages on his phone, email, and social media. She would get jealous for no apparent reason. Although this behavior was concerning, Alexander tried to ignore it because he was in love, and it didn't bother him too much. Even when she insisted he wore only the clothes she bought for him, he dismissed it as her way of showing care. Soon, Jordan began to restrict Alexander's social circle. She decided who he could see and who he could no longer stay in touch with, affecting not just his friends and classmates but also his family members. Despite this control, Jordan never complained to anyone, and they still appeared to be a happy and perfect couple in public and on social media. She began to enjoy her control over him. She deleted contacts from Alexander's phone without his knowledge, blocked his family and friends, and even replied to messages on his behalf, often in a rude and insulting way. Afterward, she deleted these conversations, so Alexander had no idea what he had said to people who no longer wanted to communicate with him. The final reason for the breakup occurred when Alexander's twin brother raised concerns. Jordan started to block their communication. By then, their parents also noticed that Alexander was pulling away from the family, while his girlfriend was avoiding them completely. She refused to visit even on holidays and didn't want to talk on the phone. When they did try to reach her, she was openly rude. In the rare moments when Alexander's mother managed to speak with him, she urged him to break up with his girlfriend, warning that the relationship would lead to trouble. However, Alexander, deeply in love, refused to listen and defended his girlfriend, insisting that she cared for him and meant no harm. The Skeel family soon realized that Jordan had pressured their son to drop out of college, quit sports, and get a job. Meanwhile, she took all the money he earned to spend on her own needs and entertainment. The parents once again tried to talk to their son and persuade him to leave Jordan, but they were unsuccessful. In 2013, during his coming-of-age celebration, Jordan committed a shocking act that went unpunished. That day, she and her friends celebrated at a country hotel. As the evening progressed and guests began to leave, Jordan suddenly vanished without telling anyone. Alexander was distraught as he searched for Jordan, fearing something had happened to her. However, she returned to their room in the morning, heavily intoxicated. When Alexander tried to find out where she had been, she violently lashed out at him with both fists and insults, then laughed. 2 months later, during his own 18th birthday celebration, Jordan started a fight in front of Alexander's family and friends. She assaulted a 15-year-old girl, who was a neighbor well known to the Skeel family and had been invited to the party. Jordan believed the girl was being overly friendly with Alexander, which prompted her to attack, pulling the girl's hair and scratching her face. Jordan was still upset, but it was obvious to everyone what her true nature was. Afterward, her parents and brother urged Alexander to break up with her because of her aggressive and inappropriate behavior. Surprisingly, for the first time, he listened to them and acknowledged that she had indeed overreacted. That same evening, he spoke with her and informed her that he would not be returning to their apartment and would instead stay at his parents' house. After nearly 6 months apart, they reunited and had children together. During that time, Alexander focused on his studies and work, rarely thinking of Jordan. However, on New Year's Eve 2014, Jordan surprised him with a call to share the news that she was pregnant and they would be parents in the spring. Alexander felt both surprised and happy. Jordan apologized for not telling him sooner, explaining that she believed he no longer wanted to see her. When the guy's parents found out they were going to have a grandchild, they were overjoyed and invited Jordan to move in with them. She accepted the offer and moved into the Skeel family home. She officially got married with Alexander, and 3 months later, she and Alexander welcomed a son named William. The young parents were extremely happy, and they enjoyed a peaceful and harmonious life together until around mid-fall 2014. During this time, Jordan genuinely cared for her partner, made an effort to please him, and fell in love with him again. When William was 6 months old, Jordan became pregnant again. During this time, she became moody and emotional, insisting that Alexander move out of his parents' house immediately. Alexander attributed her behavior to hormonal changes but agreed to rent an apartment for them in the city, and they soon moved in. In the summer of 2015, they welcomed their second child, a girl named Alice. Alexander was overjoyed and treated his wife and children with great affection. However, Jordan, feeling secure that Alexander would not leave her, began to reveal her darker side. The turning point occurred after the move. Jordan prohibited her husband from contacting his family and prevented his parents from seeing their grandchildren. Meanwhile, she accepted financial help from them and even had Alexander ask his parents for money. Within a few months, she completely dominated him, breaking his spirit and taking control of his life. Jordan frequently humiliated and insulted her husband, and eventually, she began to hit him. At first, her attacks were not severe, as she wanted to see how he would react. When she realized he would tolerate everything, keep quiet, and face no consequences for her actions, she unleashed her cruelty, revealing her violent tendencies. The trouble began during their house renovation when she was unhappy with everything Alexander did. Frustrated, he remarked that it seemed impossible to satisfy her. In response, she threw a hammer at him, hitting him on the head and causing a deep wound. Dazed and nearly unconscious, he fell to the ground, holding his head as blood streamed down his face. He asked his wife for help or to call an ambulance, but she coldly told him, "Crawl away somewhere and die," and walked into another room to watch TV. Alexander treated his head injury on his own without visiting a doctor or telling anyone. This led Jordan to believe she could do anything without consequences, convinced her husband would never report her actions and would avoid both hospitals and the police. For the next 3 years, Alexander endured constant emotional and physical suffering. He became so depressed that he didn't recognize the threat he was under. Despite this, he continued to work hard to provide for his family, but his frustration and dissatisfaction with his wife grew steadily. Jordan not only controlled him every day but also escalated the cruelty. He was not allowed to sleep on the bed and had to lie on the floor next to the bed, without a blanket or pillow. He was also banned from entering the kitchen and could only eat the leftovers that his wife and children didn't finish. This left Alexander starving. As he was unable to buy food, Jordan had taken all his money. Furthermore, his wife deprived him of sleep and rest, creating a cruel form of entertainment for herself. Whenever he finally fell asleep, she would hit him on the head or pour boiling water on him. He later remembered waking up each time in intense pain, either bleeding or burned. After that, he would tend to his wounds with whatever he could find, while his wife quietly went to bed. Alexander viewed this situation as normal. He felt morally defeated and stopped trying to fight against it. He completely cut off communication with his parents and brother, and his wife frequently asked them for money on his behalf. She also supported her own parents financially, ensuring she could afford whatever she wanted. Alexander lost a significant amount of weight and dropped below 50 pounds. His body was frequently marked by wounds, cuts, burns, and bruises, which drew concern from others. At his workplace, colleagues encouraged him to seek medical help, but his wife insisted he quit his job to avoid being discovered. After he was let go, he became trapped with Jordan, who began to abuse him continuously, leaving him longing for rescue. Although the couple appeared to be happy to outsiders, their home life was filled with horror. Jordan managed social media accounts for her husband, frequently sharing old photos of their family along with captions expressing their love and gratitude for one another. Nobody could have imagined that a woman who looked angelic and was a mother of two could transform into a sophisticated monster behind closed doors. She knocked out her husband's teeth and inflicted a deep cut on his arm with a knife. His body also showed signs of burns, but he was unable to go to the hospital. At home, he had only plastic wrap and tape, which he used to bind his wounds. Neighbors often heard screams coming from their house, and some were so alarming that they called the police. However, Jordan always managed to convince the officers that everything was fine between her and her husband. During the next visit by the police, prompted by neighbors' concerns, one officer noticed a man with a fresh wound and blood running down his arm. The man appeared emaciated and had bruises of various sizes on his face. Jordan attempted to explain to the officer that her husband was mentally unstable and sometimes harmed himself. However, this time the police called for paramedics, and Alexander was taken to the hospital. The doctors were shocked by his condition. He was barely alive, and his arm was so severely injured that amputation was a real possibility. Alexander had severe second and third-degree burns covering his body. He weighed just 94 pounds, and his shoulder ligaments were injured from being hit with a screwdriver. He also had a deep cut on his forearm, several knocked-out teeth, and many bruises. During this time, Jordan entered the hospital, insisting that her husband be released to her. She claimed that he was fine and that he had caused all his injuries himself. However, no one believed her distressed claims, and it was decided to take her to the police station for questioning. Initially, Jordan denied any wrongdoing and stuck to her claim that her husband was harming himself. However, when Alexander's parents arrived at the police station after visiting him in the hospital, her attitude changed. She went on to explain in detail the actions she had taken against her husband, saying she had trained him like a dog and that he couldn't escape from her. At the same time, Jordan argued that her husband's behavior provoked her violence, alleging he was cheating on her and intentionally trying to upset her. She also maintained that he was mentally ill and had a tendency to self-harm. The man's parents firmly denied all the claims made against him. However, he hesitated to speak out against his wife at first. It was only after receiving treatment and consulting with a psychologist that Alexander found the courage to share the traumatic experiences he endured at home in recent years. Jordan believed that she would only receive a minor administrative penalty, so she was not particularly concerned about the upcoming trial. After reviewing all the evidence, the judge convicted 22-year-old Jordan of deliberately causing serious harm, both physical and emotional abuse, as well as coercive control. She received a prison sentence of 7.5 years. Her status as a mother of 2 young children did not lessen the severity of her punishment. Jordan was taken aback by this sentence, as the case was unprecedented in the UK. The children were placed in the care of their father and grandparents during their mother's imprisonment. After fully recovering from years of abuse, Alexander began working in the community and is now helping victims of domestic violence. On July 4, 2023, Jordan was released on parole after serving 5 years of her 7.5-year sentence. However, she is not allowed to approach her ex-husband or see their children. She is currently engaged to a bricklayer named Adam Stepp and is getting ready to become a mother for the 3rd time. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of McDermott family. Mark McDermott was born in the early 1960s in Australia. But we know that Mark was the eldest of 5 siblings. Known family members include his father, Bruce McDermott, and 2 sisters, Tracy and Nicole, with Nicole being the youngest. According to those close to him, Mark was not only a successful businessman but also a kind and easygoing person. Nicole described her brother as a wonderful person who avoided causing harm to others. Information about Mark's life is limited, especially regarding his adult life. However, we do know for sure that he traveled to the southern United States, although the reasons and circumstances are unclear. It was there that he met Johanna Dunn, a single mother raising a 4-year-old son, Donald Dunn. Donald Wayne Dunn was born in the early 1990s in West Virginia and lived there with his mother's family all his life. His grandparents played a major role in Donald's early upbringing, as they cared for him most of the time. Donald's mother, Johanna, was a single working mother who found raising a child difficult, so she asked her grandparents to help. On the rare occasions when Johanna and Donald were home together, she would often entertain him with video games or television. This reflected Johanna's difficulty in giving her son her full attention, although they tried to make time for each other. Their lives changed when Mark came along. Johanna and Mark quickly fell in love and married. Johanna took her husband's last name, and the 3 of them moved to West Virginia, becoming a happy family. From the beginning, Mark and Donald were very close, as if they were related by blood. Their relatives, including Mark's sister and father, confirmed that Mark treated Donald like his own son, and Donald also considered Mark his only father. The relationship between Donald and Mark was very close, which was evident when Donald was young. During the difficult times when Mark and Johanna were temporarily separated, Donald was still determined to stay with Mark instead of his mother. At the same time, the family faced a great challenge when Johanna was diagnosed with cancer. However, thanks to their support and solidarity, they overcame these difficulties together. Mark always took good care of his stepson, ensuring that Donald had a comfortable and fulfilling life. Although Donald is a simple man and does not ask for much, he is very grateful for the peaceful and luxurious life his stepfather has created for him. When Donald graduated from high school in 2008, Mark covered the entire cost of his college education. Donald attended Rio Salado College for the first 2 years, then transferred to Marshall University in 2010. Throughout this time, Mark continued to financially support Donald's education. Donald lives with his girlfriend and her family. He and his girlfriend have been in love since they were 15 years old. Despite this, Mark and Johanna have always been very supportive of Donald. They not only pay for Donald's tuition but also support him financially in many other ways. Specifically, they cover the costs of Donald's clothes, car insurance, daily living expenses, and food. Donald dedicates all his time and effort to studying. As a responsible and diligent student, he always strictly follows his daily study schedule. He often refuses or cancels plans to meet friends and relatives, citing the need to complete assignments or study for exams. Donald prioritizes studying above everything else in his life. During his 5 years in college, he always tried his best to graduate on time and not fall behind in any semester. May 25, 2013, a Saturday, was supposed to be the big day when he received his university diploma. However, instead of being the joyous occasion he had planned, the day turned into a heartbreaking moment that would change his life forever. While the McDermott family was preparing for Donald's graduation, an emergency call was placed from their home to 911. Johanna called the police and admitted that she had shot her husband. She insisted that the act was intentional, not an accident. Police quickly arrived at the McDermott family home. Sergeant Greg Kean of the Raleigh County Sheriff's Office was one of the first law enforcement officers to arrive. When he got to the scene, he noticed that Johanna appeared to be in a state of severe shock. As he entered the home, he found Mark lying motionless on the couch in the living room. He appeared to have been reading a book when he died. Initially, Sergeant Gregg noticed that he had 2 gunshot wounds to the head. However, when investigators moved the body, they discovered a 3rd wound behind the shoulder. The medical examiner at the scene confirmed that the cause of death was head injuries, but it was possible that Mark did not die immediately after being shot. There was a lot of blood at the crime scene, suggesting that Mark had been losing blood over time before his death. According to initial reports, Donald was taking a shower to prepare for his important day. The sound of the running water from the shower drowned out the gunshots. So Donald did not hear Johanna shoot her stepfather. It was only when Donald emerged from the shower that he discovered Mark's body in the living room. On the dining room table was a pistol and a letter, presumably written by Johanna to Donald's son. In the letter, Johanna expressed her grief and explained that her marriage had become unbearable. She could no longer live with a man she did not love anymore. Johanna also apologized for leaving Donald's life when he was still a minor. At that time, Johanna and Donald were taken to the Raleigh County Sheriff's Office in a private car, where a police officer took their statements. Since Johanna was the one who called the police, the incident was initially treated as a serious case of domestic violence. In the call to the dispatcher, Johanna stated that after an argument with Mark, she had shot him in the head with a pistol in a fit of rage without realizing what she was doing. However, she later changed her story, denying what she had said before. This caught the police by surprise and forced them to adjust the entire investigation. After getting into the police car, Johanna suddenly revealed the truth that it was not her, but her son Donald who killed Mark. However, this was just the tip of the iceberg. The story was actually much more complicated than what the investigators initially thought. Johanna entered the interrogation room and met with Captain James Barr from the Raleigh County Sheriff's Office. She detailed the events that had occurred on May 25, 2013. According to Johanna, her son was scheduled to attend his graduation that morning. Before that, she had gone out to run some errands and buy groceries. Johanna had just arrived home and was about to get out of the car when Donald approached her. He asked his mother to close her eyes and follow him into the house, saying that there was a surprise. Trusting her son, Johanna complied and walked into the dining room. Donald told his mother to sit down. Suddenly, Johanna heard a distinct clicking sound. When she opened her eyes to look at her son, she was horrified to see Donald pointing his own pistol at her. The gun failed to fire, and Johanna panicked, trying to wrestle it from her son. She tried to calm down, think clearly, and make a plan to save herself from becoming Donald's victim. Seeing Mark's body, she quickly told her son that she would call 911 and take the blame for him. Although Donald was initially skeptical, he eventually agreed to his mother's plan. During her interrogation, Johanna explained why she called 911 and incriminated herself. She did so to protect herself from Donald, even though she knew she would go to jail. She believed that if she did not, Donald would kill her. Johanna expressed shock that her son would point the gun at her head and pull the trigger, something she never thought would happen in her 23 years of being a mother. The gun belonged to her. She explained that the reason the gun did not fire was probably because Donald had pulled the trigger of the semi-automatic gun too far, preventing it from firing normally. Captain James thought Johanna's story was very plausible. From the moment he met Donald, he felt something was wrong. He noticed that Donald, a 23-year-old young man, was too calm for this serious situation. His face always remained neutral, showing no emotion. Therefore, he decided to put him in a separate interrogation room, away from his mother. From the beginning of the interrogation, Donald denied any involvement in his stepfather's death. However, after being informed of Johanna's testimony, his denial quickly collapsed. James did not need to use any threats or pressure to force Donald to confess. Instead, he voluntarily recounted the whole incident, revealing every detail of the case. The story Donald told was almost unbelievable. This story begins after Donald completed his first year of college. It was clear that his academic performance was not good, and due to his low grades, he decided to drop out of school. Donald shared that at first, his courses were easy and he could get good grades just by showing up to class on time. As the semester progressed, he encountered more and more difficulties in his studies. He felt that he was not capable of continuing. Instead of admitting the truth, he decided to lie to Mark and Johanna. Not only were his close friends deceived, but his girlfriend and her family were also unaware of his true situation. According to Rachel Rush, Donald's girlfriend's sister, he created a false impression that he was studying. Donald maintained a student-like schedule, leaving and returning home at fixed times. He spent most of the day in his room and asked not to be disturbed, citing the need to focus on homework or studying for exams. To create a more convincing appearance, Donald even falsified his transcripts. This was a deliberate deception that lasted for 4.5 years. No one in Donald's life realized that he was lying to them. Donald's family trusted him completely during the time he pretended to be a student. Johanna and Mark had no idea that their son had abused the financial and emotional support they had given him all this time. Donald admitted that he had no intention of deceiving his family at first, but as time went on, it became more and more difficult to confess the truth. The main reason he could not tell the truth was because he was afraid that Mark and Johanna would stop paying for all his expenses. Although he appeared to not care much about material things like cars or expensive clothes, he did not want to give up his current lifestyle. He was well aware that he would lose a lot if his parents found out the truth. For a long time, Donald had been meticulously planning to escape all trouble. From the beginning, he had planned to kill his parents to avoid suspicion. Donald planned to leave a note similar to the one found on the dining table along with the pistol. He believed that when the police read the note, they would conclude that this was the crime of an unhappy woman who saw no other way but to kill herself. Donald told Captain James that on May 25th, he had secretly taken Johanna's pistol and kept it with him all day, pretending to be preparing for his graduation ceremony. Before carrying out the rest of his plan, he decided to go to the supermarket to have his image recorded by the surveillance cameras, in order to use this evidence to prove his innocence. Before the murder, Donald had begun to show an interest in shooting practice. Although his best friend Alex Willis found this strange, Alex did not suspect anything as he did not think Donald would want to use a gun to attack someone. Donald's considerations and conclusions left everyone who heard them afterwards confused. James shared that this young man admitted that he had even planned the emotions he would express on his face when the police arrived at the scene. He also thought about how he would support himself after losing the steady income provided by Mark, and decided to take advantage of the sympathy of his loved ones as long as he could. While his family supported him, he decided to take up sports to improve his health and fitness. If he had no other choice, he would consider joining the police force or the army. When considering the possibility of his plan succeeding, Donald realized that it would be easier to kill his mother and stepfather than to admit that he had been lying to them for nearly 5 years. In April 2016, the West Virginia Supreme Court released a legal opinion. According to the opinion, Donald was charged with first-degree murder and attempted murder 1 month after his arrest in June 2013. Even before the trial, Donald and his legal team sought to delay the trial. A few weeks before the trial was scheduled to begin, the defendant, Donald Dunn, who had been held in solitary confinement, underwent surgery on his right hand. His attorneys used the surgery as a reason to request a delay, arguing that during the initial hearings, he would be under the influence of strong painkillers. To decide this issue, the court first requested his medical records. However, this request was denied on the grounds that, at the preliminary hearing, there was no evidence that Donald was partially incapacitated due to the use of painkillers. Therefore, the court determined that he was competent to attend trial and approved the continuation of the scheduled trial. The trial took place in August 2014, over a year after Mark's death. It was presided over by Judge John Hutchinson, with David White representing Donald and Christine Keller from the Raleigh County Prosecutor's Office. Mark's 2 sisters, along with one of their nieces, traveled more than 15,000 kilometers from Australia to attend the trial of the man they had considered a family member for nearly 20 years. Although there were no details from witness testimony or evidence presented to the jury, and no photographs or video footage, the defense wanted to include in their opening argument that Donald was under the influence of illegal drugs at the time of the crime. However, there was no evidence that this had ever been mentioned before or confirmed by any toxicology tests. On August 14, 2014, Donald Dunn was convicted of the murder of his stepfather, Mark McDermott, the attempted murder of his mother, Johanna McDermott, and the use of a firearm. About a month later, on September 5 of the same year, Judge John Hutchinson sentenced Donald Dunn to life in prison without parole for the murder of his stepfather and 15 years in prison for the attempted murder of his mother. After the verdict was announced, Johanna read an emotional letter to the court. In the letter, Donald's mother mentioned that something unfortunate had happened in her son's life. This could have been due to the decline in health of his grandparents, the pressure she put on him to go to college, or his exposure to violent video games at a very young age. She expressed her disapproval of the way her son was perceived by the public and stated that she did not agree with his sentence. However, Judge John explained that Johanna's objections did not affect his decision. He felt that the sentence he imposed was the only way to restore justice in an unjust situation. He sympathized with the defendant's mother, who, despite the circumstances, wanted to protect her son from the consequences of his actions. After the verdict, Mark's sister and father still could not understand how Donald could take the life of a man who had raised him as his own son for 19 years. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Zhu Ling. The story begins at a prestigious event at Tsinghua University, often referred to as the Harvard of China. The university has teamed up with the Beijing Symphony Orchestra to stage a performance. The audience is dressed in formal attire, with the men in dark suits and the women in beautiful evening gowns, all chatting politely as they take their seats in the Grand Theater. Zhu Ling, a student from Tsinghua University, is set to take the stage that evening. For Zhu, her assignment is to play a 6-minute solo on the guqin, a traditional Chinese instrument. This performance will be a defining moment for her future career. The audience, which includes professors, bosses, and benefactors, is vital to her career prospects, and she needs to engage them and leave a lasting impression with her performance. The guqin is a derided instrument favored by intellectuals. In Chinese culture, guqin players are often considered refined and gentle. A Song Dynasty guqin sold for $22 million, making it one of the most valuable musical instruments. In the days leading up to the event, stress-induced stomach aches and blurred vision took their toll on her health. Zhu's friends gathered near the stage, their anxiety evident as they watched her prepare to perform. For 2 months, Zhu had devoted herself to this moment. When Zhu stepped onto the stage, bowed to the audience, and began to play the guqin, her friends held their breath. But as the music filled the theater, their tension disappeared. Zhu's stage presence was captivating, her hands moving gently, creating beautiful sounds that echoed in the hearts of the audience. Some of her friends were deeply moved, tears rolling down their faces. The 6-minute performance ended and the audience applauded enthusiastically. Zhu bowed to the audience, smiled, and walked off the stage. Her best friend was in the crowd, proudly applauding enthusiastically. Because the hard work of practicing had left her completely exhausted, that night, Zhu Ling decided to skip the celebration and go home to rest. When she went to take a shower, standing under the cool water of the shower, washing her hair, she caught a glimpse of a strand of hair floating on her hand. Panicked, she ran her hand through her hair and touched her scalp. She quickly pulled back the shower curtain and ran to the mirror to check. Zhu's reflection in the mirror showed a face of exhausted exhaustion, with uneven bald patches that looked like they had been shaved off carelessly. But that was just the beginning. Over the next few weeks, her condition rapidly deteriorated, leaving her confined to a wheelchair, unable to move, speak, or even control her facial expressions. She went from a promising student at Tsinghua University to someone with the intellectual capacity of a 6-year-old. This was not the result of an illness or genetic disorder. Tsinghua University is one of the most prestigious schools in China, making it extremely competitive for local students to gain admission. With an acceptance rate of just 0.4% for local students, the university has a massive annual budget of $5 billion and is known for educating the children of influential politicians and wealthy businessmen, who are often highly educated. Getting into college is just the first hurdle. The real challenge lies in coping with the fierce competition and rivalry that pervades college life. Many alumni have come forward to admit that they have resorted to deceit and deception, such as betraying friends and deceiving others, to stay ahead. This cutthroat environment is a direct result of the university culture, which strongly fosters a competitive spirit. Zhu Ling, a 1994 chemistry major at Tsinghua University, is one of the top 3 students in her class of 31. Her class consists of 20 men and 11 women. She is an outstanding student and is considered by many to be special. Zhu is not only smart but also has an outstanding appearance. Everyone expects great things from her and predicts a bright future. Zhu has a charisma and confidence that makes her friends jealous when she first arrives at the dormitory. Her warm and friendly demeanor quickly won her friends and fans. She attended classes diligently, and many were amazed by her seemingly endless energy. However, after a few months, people began to notice a strange and inexplicable decline in Zhu's health. She began arriving to class later than her classmates and always appeared exhausted during lectures. She sweated as if she was overheated. Zhu had a hard time concentrating on the lesson content. One day, she even had a severe stomachache. Zhu asked for painkillers from the school's infirmary, but the pain was only slightly relieved. Her teacher thought it was a stomachache caused by stress. Zhu's health began to deteriorate. She began to come to class a little late, and gradually she was absent from classes altogether. Her friends were very worried and decided to visit her at the dormitory, where she lived with 3 other girls. When they arrived, they found Zhu lying on the bed, shaking and moaning in pain. Her black hair was falling out in patches. Her friends were worried and urged her to see a doctor, but Zhu said she was just stressed and would return to class the next day, assuring them that she would be back to normal by the end of the semester. The once healthy Zhu was now almost unrecognizable. Her skin had turned pale, and her lips had turned purple. She moved slowly and painfully, as if every step caused her excruciating pain. Most of her hair had fallen out, leaving her nearly bald, forcing her to constantly wear something to cover her head. Zhu also suffered from recurring vision problems, resulting in temporary blindness that lasted for hours at a time, adding to her distress. Rumors of Zhu Ling's deteriorating condition quickly spread throughout the school. Many students speculated about the cause of her symptoms, suggesting that she might have cancer, hair loss, or an immune system disorder. However, a more worrying theory emerged among the students, who believed that Zhu's decline was related to stress caused by a disagreement with her close friend Sunny. The conflict began when Zhu missed an important orchestra rehearsal for a difficult piece. Sunny told her instructor that Zhu did not attend because she thought she was too good and believed that others needed to catch up to her level before she could participate. The revelation of Sunny's malicious comments was extremely difficult for Zhu to accept. Beige, a friend from Peking University, and Zhu's high school friends decided to visit her in the hospital, bringing a basket of fruit. However, upon entering the hospital room, Beige was shocked. His first reaction was to run away, not because he was afraid of being infected, but because he was shocked to see his classmate in such a bad condition. He couldn't understand how a 20-year-old girl full of vitality could change so quickly. What kind of disease could take away everything Zhu had worked so hard to build? The medical team was confused by Zhu's condition. Just a few months ago, she was still very healthy, but now she was critically ill, attached to many machines and nasal tubes, barely wearing clothes and almost bald. Her body convulsed, her face was partially paralyzed, and her eyes were wide open, desperately begging for help. Just the slightest touch caused her excruciating pain. Even the thin fabric of the hospital gown was unbearable for her. Seeing the silent cry for help in Zhu's eyes, Beige decided to seek answers, along with Zhu's parents, to try to understand her condition and find a solution. Zhu initially suffered from mild abdominal pain for a month or two before her condition worsened. These pains would come and go unexpectedly, like contractions. The pain became more intense over the next week, forcing her to bend over in pain and often curl up on the ground. As the pain worsened, Zhu's parents said she tried to control the pain by drinking a lot of Chinese herbal tea. However, the tea had no effect and the pain became more and more intense, eventually causing her to pass out. At first, Zhu did not seek medical attention, hoping that her symptoms would subside on their own due to her busy school schedule. But her condition worsened as her vision began to deteriorate. Her vision blurred, then disappeared for hours. Things got worse for Zhu as her hair began to fall out. Her condition continued to deteriorate, forcing her parents to take her to the hospital, which happened just days before Christmas, marking her first hospital stay. That month, Zhu's parents continued to support her throughout her treatment. Tests showed that Zhu was free of arsenic and mercury poisoning. A doctor from another hospital who had treated a similar case in the 1960s suggested a possible case of thallium poisoning. This seemed plausible, but Zhu insisted she had not been exposed to thallium during her studies. To investigate further, the hospital contacted Tsinghua University to determine what chemicals Zhu, as a chemistry student, might have come across. However, her medical records showed no exposure to potential triggers for her symptoms, leaving the medical team puzzled over her condition. Zhu's health seemed to have improved after a month, so she asked if she could continue studying. She wanted to take the exam and did not want to miss the entire semester. However, her parents disagreed, believing that stress had caused her illness, and worried that returning to university would worsen her health. Zhu pretended to have fully recovered and returned to class in February. Unfortunately, her condition rapidly deteriorated in March and she was hospitalized again. This time, her condition had deteriorated so much that she lost the ability to speak. Beige's frustration with the lack of answers from the local medical community led him to reach out to medical professionals around the world, not just in China, for help. He translated Zhu's symptoms into multiple languages and posted them on specialized online medical forums. Beige received his first response in less than 30 minutes, and over the next few days, he received nearly 2,000 emails from experts in 18 countries. Notably, many of these respondents were affiliated with prominent national health organizations and were experts in toxicology. Their answers, which were symptoms of thallium poisoning, causing her pain ranging from mild to severe. Thallium is a highly toxic metal that was once used in rat poison, but its use has been banned in many countries, including China and the United States, since the early 20th century. It was also used to treat lice infestations, although a known side effect was hair loss. The symptoms of thallium poisoning can be very varied, leading to delayed diagnosis and often misdiagnosis by medical professionals. One of the challenges in identifying thallium poisoning is that it does not cause visible external signs, such as bruises or wounds. The progression of thallium poisoning typically occurs in stages. Initial symptoms begin with stomach upset and severe pain, followed by tremors, headaches, insomnia, and temporary blindness. As the poisoning progresses, the victim may experience extreme skin sensitivity, similar to a severe burn, making even light touch unbearable. Daily activities, such as getting dressed or lying in bed, may become a source of pain. In the late stages of thallium poisoning, neurological symptoms appear, including uncontrolled muscle movements, seizures, and partial or complete paralysis. This can eventually lead to significant cognitive impairment. In severe cases, such as Zhu's, thallium poisoning can cause a significant decline in cognitive ability, turning a top-achieving student into someone with the mental capacity of a 6-year-old. Beige worked with Zhu's parents to analyze numerous emails and quickly shared their findings with the medical team treating Zhu. However, the doctors treating Zhu were skeptical of the online contributors' proposed diagnosis, saying that detecting thallium in Zhu's body would require specific tests that could not be performed on-site. They also pointed out that thallium testing would require sending Zhu's blood to a specialized lab, and thallium is a rare and highly regulated substance. Even if thallium poisoning were the correct diagnosis, the doctors believed that an antidote would likely not be effective at that stage. This information shocked Zhu's loved ones, raising an important question: who would want to harm Zhu? One theory emerged that the target could be her parents, given their important jobs. Her father was a senior engineer at a national agency, a position that could involve handling sensitive information, and her mother was an engineer at a major Chinese company. However, this line of investigation has hit a dead end. The main goal now is to find out how the poison entered Zhu's body. In particular, no one on campus has symptoms similar to Zhu's. This suggests that Zhu either ingested or came into direct contact with the substance. Meanwhile, while Zhu was in the hospital, her personal items were mysteriously stolen from her dormitory. The stolen items included shampoo, contact lens case, lipstick, body soap, and even her water cup. Furthermore, the perpetrator seemed to be interested only in Zhu's belongings, marking a strange and unprecedented incident in the dormitory of such a prestigious university. Since there were no surveillance cameras on campus at the time, an investigation was needed to find out the answer. Because students are housed in separate rooms by gender, only current female students at Tsinghua University are allowed to enter the female dormitory. Neither alumni, graduate students, nor professors are allowed to enter the dormitory housing more than 100 young female students. During the investigation, the police investigated more than 20 suppliers of thallium, a toxic substance used in the production of optical lenses, electronic devices, and other products. The police scrutinized the procurement records and discovered that one supplier had supplied thallium to the chemistry department of Tsinghua University for research purposes. The investigation found that only a small group of people at the university had access to the thallium, namely 2 professors, 3 graduate students, and 2 seniors. It is likely that the criminals were involved in these experiments, so they had the opportunity to obtain the thallium and had the opportunity to take personal belongings from Zhu's dorm room. As the investigation continued, the professors and graduate students were quickly eliminated as suspects because they were not allowed into the female dormitory. This left 2 senior students as prime suspects, 1 male and 1 female. However, since male students were not allowed into the female dormitory, everyone turned their attention to the female student. Surprisingly, this student was revealed to be Zhu's close friend Sunny, who is now the prime suspect in Zhu's case. Mutual friends of Sunny and Zhu mentioned that Zhu had recently won against Sunny in the student election. Sunny was known to not accept defeat easily. She was argumentative by nature and had cheated on Zhu several times. As Zhu achieved more success and recognition, Sunny became increasingly agitated. The final straw was Zhu's stellar performance at the Beijing Symphony Hall, which further strained their relationship. Zhu's exceptional beauty, talent, and admiration from both her peers and faculty may have fueled Sunny's jealousy, leading to the heartbreaking incident. Sunny was interrogated for 8 hours before her parents took her home. Her family is influential at Tsinghua University, with her father a key figure in the Democratic Revolutionary Committee and her grandfather a former vice president. Most of her relatives hold government or academic positions at top state universities. As a result, Zhu's case remains unsolved. Sunny maintains her innocence, claiming that the police have cleared her of all suspicion. However, she changed her name and date of birth, married an American, and moved to the United States. Zhu's condition, on the other hand, was worsened by the late diagnosis of thallium poisoning. By the time the diagnosis was confirmed, the thallium levels in her body were already alarmingly high, and treatment with the antidote Prussian blue was ineffective. The poisoning left Zhu permanently disabled, with irreversible nerve damage, resulting in the mental capacity of a 6-year-old child. Zhu's family received $14,000 in compensation from the hospital for mishandling her medical records, and the police quietly closed the investigation without informing them. Zhu Ling survived the incident for 50 years, but the perpetrators were never brought to justice. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Catherine Pelgi. Ronald Vinci was born on August 16, 1940, in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. From a young age, he showed a natural talent for entrepreneurship. In his 20s, he started his first business by renting a space on the Pacific coast to sell Honda motorcycles. Over time, his small shop grew into one of the largest Honda dealership centers in the state. As his business success continued to grow, so did his wealth. Ronald expanded his business by opening more car dealerships, which significantly increased his earnings. Those who worked for him often described him as a strong-willed and determined individual. In his personal life, Ronald Vinci was married to a woman named Pamela, with whom he had a son named Carrie. However, their marriage eventually ended in divorce. After his divorce, Ronald began living a more extravagant lifestyle, spending his wealth on luxury items such as expensive toys, airplanes, and helicopters. His passion for collecting aircraft led him to acquire a large hangar to house his extensive collection. Ronald simplified his daily commute to work by securing government approval to build a helicopter pad on his property, despite some of his neighbors opposing the idea. Having the helicopter pad allowed him to commute to work directly from home by helicopter. He also had helicopter pads installed on the roofs of his car dealerships, making it easier for him to travel by air. Ronald, then 50 years old, met 34 years old Catherine in 1990. At the time, Catherine worked as a flight attendant. She originally from a family in a rural area of Georgia. Growing up, she participated in local beauty pageants where her bright smile and charisma easily captivated people. Her striking beauty and cheerful personality earned her many admirers. After completing her education, Catherine worked as a lab technician at a veterans hospital for several years. However, she felt unfulfilled and longed for more in life. Seeking a change, Catherine left her job in 1980 to join Delta Airlines as a flight attendant, earning an annual income of $20,000. She enjoyed her new role, taking care of passengers and serving meals, and even acquired useful tips like using coffee grounds to eliminate unpleasant odors on airplane seats. 10 years into her career as a flight attendant, Catherine's life took a dramatic turn. In 1990, she met Ronald Vinci, a millionaire, on a flight. Despite their 14-year age difference, they fell in love, drawn to each other's charming personalities. Catherine eventually left her job and moved into Ronald's luxurious California home. Together, they shared a passion for travel and explored various destinations, with Aspen, Colorado, being a favorite getaway spot. Ronald and Catherine were in a decade-long relationship, but Ronald never proposed to Catherine. Eventually, they decided to part ways. Catherine moved to Florida, seeking a fresh start and a new partner. In April 2001, at age 45, Catherine began a relationship with 63 years old Dilio Carano, a financially stable insurance agent, after being introduced by mutual friends. She shared with Dilio her previous unhappy relationship with Ronald, explained that it was a difficult time, filled with arguments, excessive drinking, and infidelity. Ronald had never proposed, despite her decade-long hope for marriage. Dilio promptly proposed to Catherine, and they got married in May 2001, just a month after meeting. After their wedding, the couple settled in Miami Beach, Florida, and Catherine seemed content with the marriage. Dilio describes Catherine's initial demeanor as being like a house cat, gentle, calm, and eating very little. In addition, Catherine is very afraid of water. She cannot bathe in the ocean, sea, or river. A few months into their marriage, Dilio noticed a dramatic change in Catherine's behavior. She began asking him for large sums of money, insisting that he buy her clothes and gifts. She would often compare him to her friends' more generous husbands. According to Dilio, Catherine was taking about $55,000 per month from him. She claimed the money was for education expenses, but never provided any receipts. After a few months of this financial strain, Dilio realized he had made a mistake by rushing into the marriage. He decided he wanted a divorce. The separation process was relatively easy, as they had no children or shared assets. Court documents revealed that Dilio's net worth was $4.5 million, while Catherine had only $8,000 in her accounts. As Catherine prepared to move out of Dilio's house, she was overwhelmed with sadness and despair. In 2005, Ronald Vinci, a wealthy millionaire, made a big change by moving to Fort Lauderdale, Florida, where friends had convinced him he would enjoy a favorable climate and low taxes. Prior to the move, Ronald had sold his car dealerships and amassed a substantial fortune. He purchased a luxurious fourth-floor apartment in Fort Lauderdale and soon reconnected with Catherine, a flight attendant he had previously dated. Catherine moved in with Ronald, and they rekindled their romance. Coincidentally, Catherine's ex-husband, Dilio Carano, lived in the same building but 30 floors. Dilio was perplexed by Catherine's decision to reconnect with Ronald, whom she had previously described as a monster. Neither Ronald nor Catherine go to work. They enjoyed a life of leisure, but their differences became increasingly apparent. Ronald struggled with his weight due to his love of rich foods, while Catherine maintained a strict diet and a very low weight of 42 kilograms. Ronald and Catherine had distinct personalities. Ronald loved attending lively parties, whereas Catherine preferred quieter evenings at home, often lost in crime novels. She favored casual clothing like shorts and sneakers. Despite their contrasting tastes, they commonly traveled together, exploring the Caribbean islands by air and sailing across the ocean. However, she struggled with aquaphobia, and her diary entries revealed her intense fear of the ocean. Ronald consistently encouraged Catherine to overcome her fear, and she made an effort to join him on these adventures despite her anxieties. This suggests Ronald had a strong influence over her. When not traveling, Ronald and Catherine would often host gatherings at their home. During these events, Ronald enjoyed great food and drinks, frequently ordering $1 tacos and strong beverages when out with friends at budget-friendly bars along the Fort Lauderdale waterfront. On occasion, he would embarrass Catherine by implying she was entirely dependent on him. Despite this, Catherine remained calm and composed. However, Catherine maintained her composure. She would quietly cater to Ronald's needs, especially when he had been drinking, by serving drinks and snacks and attending to his friends. Ronald's relationship with Catherine persisted for 5 years, despite his increasing hesitation to propose marriage. By 2010, he began sharing his feelings with friends, revealing his desire to end the relationship and find a younger partner. In early 2011, Ronald was hospitalized due to severe intestinal issues, which his doctors attributed to his years of excessive alcohol consumption. Prior to the hospitalization, Ronald had noticed an unusual change in the taste of his food, which sparked concern for his health. A friend joked that Catherine might have tried to poison him, but Ronald dismissed the idea without considering it seriously. Ronald's health issues mainly stemmed from his poor self-care. His frequent consumption of alcohol and pills, which he used to unwind and sleep, had severe negative effects on his body. Ronald Vinci purchased a $3 million waterfront home in Fort Lauderdale in June 2011, where he planned to spend his retirement. The 70-year-old millionaire looked forward to visits from his son, Kerry, and his grandson. Kerry worked as a waiter, a job that Ronald often teased his about, Ronald jokingly suggesting he was holding out for his inheritance. Tragedy struck on the afternoon of June 28, 2011. When Ronald's gardener called 911, reporting an incident at the mansion. Upon arrival, police found Ronald's lifeless body in a guest bedroom, wrapped in plastic bags and tightly sealed with tape inside a sleeping bag. Additionally, the sleeping bag contained soiled sheets and was covered with what appeared to be wet dirt, later confirmed to be coffee grounds. A further investigation revealed a slashed mattress. The gardener told the police that Catherine had said Ronald fell down the stairs, hit his head, and died. However, the officers were not convinced it was an accident. During questioning, the gardener provided a disturbing account of the incident before finding Ronald Vinci's body. When the gardener arrived at the Ronald residence in the morning, after receiving an urgent call from Catherine late at night, he was met with an horrific scene. Ronald's lifeless body was wrapped tightly in a sleeping bag in a guest bedroom. Catherine, visibly upset, begged the gardener to help her bury Ronald, revealing that Ronald wanted to be laid to rest in the ocean after his death. To fulfill this wish, Catherine had bought a blue container for Ronald's body, intending to take it out to sea on Ronald's yacht. Catherine had already stored the container in her garage before authorities were notified by the gardener. The medical examiner's thorough examination revealed horrific findings. 70-year-old Ronald had suffered from 9 stab wounds to his chest and neck, had injuries consistent with being hit by a hammer, and was ultimately killed by a gunshot wound to the head. Earlier, on the evening of June 27, friends gathered at Ronald's house. Catherine prepared a meal for the guests, while Ronald served drinks. The evening seemed normal at first, but it quickly turned into a tragic one. On the evening in question, Ronald reported that his passport and one of his pistols were missing during dinner. He also complained about the food, saying it was unusually bitter. Feeling unwell, Ronald unexpectedly went to bed at 7:30 p.m., a departure from his usual late-night routine. His friends found this early bedtime suspicious and eventually left his house. Later that night, Catherine was brought in for questioning. In her confession, she described a confrontation with Ronald, which occurred around 1 a.m. on June 28. According to she, a drunk Ronald woke up and began verbally insulting her. The situation escalated, resulting in Ronald chasing her down the stairs. However, he lost his balance, stumbled, and fell, hitting his head severely. Catherine claimed that she helped Ronald up and led him to a guest bedroom on the first floor. After cleaning the blood stains on the stairs, she checked on him a few hours later and found him asleep with a loaded gun. Catherine stated that she feared for her life, believing Ronald might kill her. In a state of fear and desperation, she grabbed the gun and shot Ronald in the head. During the interrogation, Catherine explained her actions, saying she was consumed by fear and anger, feeling as though her soul had left her body. After the shooting, Catherine further injured Ronald by stabbing him with a knife and hitting him with a hammer. She then wrapped his body in a bag in an attempt to hide the evidence. Realizing she needed help, Catherine contacted someone known as the gardener for assistance with disposing of the body. Before hiding the body, Catherine purchased a large container from a hardware store, intending to use it to dispose of Ronald's body in the ocean. This was confirmed by surveillance camera photos. Subsequent investigations uncovered a gun in Catherine's car, with her fingerprints on it, matching the gun used to shoot Ronald. Her car also contained a knife, pieces of a cut-up mattress, clothing, rubber gloves, all stained with Ronald's blood. Catherine was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. Just a month before the crime, she had been involved in a dispute with her sister. Catherine's sister claimed that she had borrowed money and refused to pay it back. But she maintained that the money was a gift and therefore did not owe her sister anything. Ronald's neighbors reported hearing screams coming from his house on the night of the murder. Additionally, a witness spotted a white vehicle with a large trailer near Ronald's house early in the morning. The car belonged to the gardener. According to Ronald's friends, he had been trying to end his relationship with Catherine for some time. The couple had been experiencing marital problems, including a lack of intimacy, and had been sleeping in separate rooms for months. In an attempt to finalize the separation, Ronald had tried to give she $1 million, just weeks before the tragedy, asking her to leave their house permanently. Prosecutors suspect Catherine's main motive was fear of losing her wealthy partner, Ronald. In contrast, Catherine's defense team argued that she was a victim of severe abuse and had acted in self-defense. Several questions arose during the trial, including why Catherine didn't immediately contact the police, why she initially lied about the incident, and why she endured years of abuse without leaving Ronald. Catherine's relatives testified in her defense, and a court psychiatrist identified signs of domestic abuse. However, none of Ronald's close friends or associates witnessed or reported any mistreatment in their relationship. Instead, they described she as calm and content, never complaining about her life. During the trial, Catherine made a surprising accusation against Ronald, claiming that he was responsible for the sudden and mysterious death of her younger sister, Angela, in December 2009. Catherine, Ronald, and Angela went on a Caribbean cruise together. Angela struggled with substance abuse and, during a party on the ship, she drank excessively, leading to severe illness and intense convulsions. In an attempt to save her sister, Catherine performed CPR, but unfortunately, Angela's heart stopped and she passed away. It was later discovered that Ronald had given Angela some pills on the evening of the cruise, which allegedly were intended to help her relax. Catherine strongly believed that these pills played a role in her sister's death. However, in an unexpected turn of events, Catherine was found guilty of Ronald's murder in 2014. The jury delivered a verdict that resulted in Catherine being sentenced to 25 years in prison. She is currently serving her sentence at the LEL Correctional Institution in Marin County, Florida, and is set to be released in January 2034 at the age of 77. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Annie Tayan. Annie Tayan was born on May 1, 1965, in Charleston, South Carolina, and was raised by her mother. She had a strong love for life, dancing, fun, and the simple pleasures it brought. Annie dreamed of having a family and considered motherhood her greatest goal. She began this journey very early, giving birth to her first son, Jimia, at the age of 18, followed by her second son, Sean, just a year later. By the age of 20, she welcomed her third child, a daughter named Shane. Unfortunately, shortly after Shane was born, the children's father left Annie, became uninvolved in their lives, and abandoned the family. Annie faced the hardships of raising 3 young children in a rented apartment in Maine. In 1987, when her youngest daughter Shane was only 6 months old, Annie, 22, met Michael Palin, 32, a Navy officer stationed on the aircraft carrier Bramby. Their meeting took place in Portland, Maine, where Michael's ship was docked, and he felt an immediate attraction to Annie during their waterfront encounter. Michael lived in Charleston, South Carolina, and was a respected member of the Navy, known for his work as a computer systems operator. He was actively involved in military operations and had received several awards. Annie was fascinated by Michael's naval career and quickly fell in love with him, telling a friend that she had found a man she felt was truly worthy of her love. After dating for a few months, Annie and Michael decided to move in together, creating a family with 2 sons and a daughter. Unfortunately, their life together took a tragic turn when a fire broke out in their apartment. Annie was away at the time, leaving Michael with the children. Michael, along with Jimia and Sean, were able to escape, but Shane, who was too young to walk, was left behind. When Annie returned, she tried to enter the burning apartment to save Shane, but the neighbors prevented her. The loss of Shane in the fire had a profound effect on Annie. After the devastating fire, Annie and her sons moved to her mother's house in Portland. Meanwhile, Michael focused on his work and decided to stay in the barracks. A few months after the move, a disturbing event occurred near Annie's mother's house. A shed in the backyard was set on fire. The police quickly traced the source of the fire and found a lighter engraved with the name Bramby, the ship on which Michael served. This discovery made Michael the prime suspect in the arson case. However, despite the incriminating evidence, the police were unable to link him to the crime due to insufficient evidence. After the second fire, Maine child welfare authorities discovered that Annie's sons were living in unsafe conditions with her. As a result, they made the decision to remove Jimia and Sean from her custody and place them in the care of the Department of Social Services. This decision devastated Annie, who tried her best to regain custody of her children. But she was unsuccessful and lost custody of her sons. When Michael's ship returned to Charleston, South Carolina, he settled into a rental apartment and reunited with Annie. Despite their complicated past, Annie decided to move in with him in Goose Creek, a suburb of Charleston. However, while there, Annie discovered a photo of Michael wearing a wedding ring, revealing that he was married. When confronted, Michael confessed to Annie that he had been married but was now divorced. He explained that his ex-wife, Dawn Breeze, and their 3 children lived with his mother in Savannah, Georgia. Although Michael assured Annie that he was no longer in a relationship with Dawn, Annie was deeply troubled by this revelation. She considered leaving him but ultimately chose to stay, seeing Michael as a partner with whom to start a family. However, their living situation became negative. Michael became increasingly hostile and disrespectful to Annie. As she considered moving back to her mother's home, she discovered she was pregnant. This unexpected news kept her from leaving and brought her joy as she anticipated the birth of another child. In October 1989, Annie gave birth to her fourth daughter, Jade. Although she knew Jade could never replace her lost daughter, she felt that Jade filled an important void in her heart. In the month after Jade was born, Michael's treatment of Annie worsened. He began publicly insulting and humiliating her. Annie confided to a friend that she feared that if she tried to leave, Michael would relentlessly pursue her. His controlling behavior increased. He locked Annie in their apartment. When he left for work, he would disconnect his phone and take it with him. Annie became increasingly concerned about his actions. Annie, feeling distressed, called her best friend Katie French. During the call, Annie revealed that she was planning to leave Michael. However, Michael threatened that if she left, their daughter Jade would stay with him and Annie would never see her again. Overwhelmed, Annie cried and begged Katie to come immediately to help her and Jade. Unfortunately, Katie was busy and unable to help. Instead, she sent Annie money for a bus ticket, hoping that it would help her escape and return to Portland. This urgent conversation turned out to be their last. 2 days later, on November 7, 1989, Katie tried to contact Annie but received no response. A few days later, Michael informed Katie that Annie had left on November 6, taking her belongings and heading to an unknown destination. Katie expected Annie to contact her from her new home, but after 2 weeks of no news, she grew increasingly worried. By Thanksgiving, November 24, Annie had been out of contact for 20 days. Worried about Annie's safety, Katie tried to contact Annie's friends and acquaintances, but no one had any information about her. When Katie tried to report Annie Tayan, 24, missing to the police, she was told that she could not file a formal report because she was not a family member. As months passed without any updates on Annie, Katie finally contacted Michael's mother. Katie was shocked to learn that Annie's youngest daughter, Jade, was living with Michael's mother. The news confirmed Katie's deepest fears. She was certain that Annie would never willingly leave her daughter behind. Shortly after the disturbing events, Michael Palin moved to the naval base at Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. He did not appear to be concerned about her disappearance. Michael did not contact the police or begin a search for Annie. The official search began after Annie's mother reported her missing. Initially, the investigation focused on her husband Michael Palin, who quickly became the prime suspect. Michael explained that on the morning of November 6, he woke up to find Annie had left, leaving their daughter with him. Michael said that the night before, Annie had mentioned that she wanted to end their relationship. Michael did not look for Annie because he thought their relationship was over and felt no need to contact her any further. He also claimed that he was unaware of Annie's disappearance. After searching the couple's rented apartment, the police found no evidence. Annie Tayan's case seemed to have stalled, with no further search for her. Questions about her current location, whether she was still alive, and the possible motives of any kidnappers remained unanswered. The only known fact is that the last person confirmed to have seen her was her partner, Michael. For 4 long years, there was no news or sign of Annie. Her best friend, Katie French, was the only one actively looking for her. She worked tirelessly on the investigation and her phone bill alone cost her approximately $16,000. Katie hired a private investigator and was determined to continue the search. She contacted various organizations to gather information about Michael's background. Katie was convinced that Michael was dangerous and untrustworthy. She was terrified of him, knowing that if Michael learned of her ties to the police, it could put her in danger. In 1993, Annie's case was transferred to the Naval Criminal Investigative Service, marking a major change in the investigation. Naval Criminal Investigative Service agents began a comprehensive review of the case from the beginning. They found Michael Palin, who was staying at Pearl Harbor Naval Base in Hawaii. When Coast Guard agents attempted to speak with him about Annie's disappearance, Michael agreed to speak only if his attorney was present. He then completely stopped cooperating with the investigation and refused to provide any further assistance or information. The Coast Guard agents gathered all available information about Annie's disappearance and contacted the South Carolina Police Department. They asked the department to cross-reference their records with any unidentified bodies, noting that Annie had given birth just a month before her disappearance. South Carolina police then reported a case involving a dead woman who had also given birth a month before her death. They provided a sketch of what the woman looked like, shocking the Coast Guard agents. They believed they had found Annie Tayan. The discovery revealed a brutal murder, with her body found next to a highway in Jasper County, South Carolina, about 100 miles from her home with Michael. The crime scene photos were horrifying. Annie's face was severely crushed, and her skull was broken into 124 pieces, requiring nearly 500 hours of detailed reconstruction. Her body was found in a duffel bag that had been doused with gasoline and set on fire. The burning bag was discovered at 6 a.m. on November 7, 1989, the same time Katie French noticed Annie had stopped answering her calls. Annie was identified by comparing her dental records to those of the unidentified woman. After Annie's body was found, Michael became the prime suspect in her murder. The Coast Guard developed a detailed investigation plan, starting with a review of his financial transactions. They discovered that on the day Annie went missing, Michael had made a credit card purchase about 25 miles south of where her body was found. Additionally, his phone records showed that on the morning of November 6, he called his mother's home in Savannah twice, once at 4:35 a.m. and again at 5:17 a.m. Based on this evidence, police believe that Michael killed Annie in their apartment, then moved her body and left it on the side of the road, where he burned it. Naval Criminal Investigative Service agents targeted Michael Palin's ex-wife, Dawn Breeze. At the time of Annie's death, Dawn was still married to Michael and lived in his mother's home in Savannah. After Annie went missing, Dawn divorced Michael and began moving around the state several times, apparently trying to avoid someone or something. Agents eventually tracked her down to Miami, Florida, in the summer of 1995, nearly 6 years after Annie Tayan's murder. When they found Dawn, she was making a living through psychic activities. During a visit to her workplace to discuss Annie's disappearance, Dawn responded surprisingly calmly. She asked how long the conversation would last, saying she wanted to eat if it lasted. This response surprised the agents, as they had expected a more emotional response regarding Annie. However, Dawn remained calm throughout their discussion. During the 10-hour interrogation, Dawn's story initially matched Michael's. She said that when she visited Michael's apartment, he told her that his mistress had left and that he planned to raise their daughter on his own. However, Dawn was silent, looked down, and said that she wanted to tell the truth. Her next speech was emotionless and tearless as she shared what she had kept secret for 6 years. Dawn revealed that Michael had called her to his Charleston apartment early one morning. She discovered Annie's body on the living room floor. Michael told Dawn to go into the bedroom to see his daughter. At the time, Dawn and Michael were still legally married and had 3 children together. Michael admitted to Dawn that he had had an affair with Annie, which resulted in the birth of a daughter. He begged her to accept the child and help him raise his daughter. Dawn claimed that rather than face a custody battle with Annie, Michael chose to kill to gain custody. Dawn added, on the night of November 5th and 6th, 1989, Michael and Annie went to bed after having sex. After a while, Annie fell asleep. At this point, Michael violently attacked her with a crowbar. Their daughter, Jade, was lying next to Annie in bed during the horrific incident. Michael continued to beat Annie on the head with increasing brutality. Despite her attempts to fight back, Annie eventually died of her injuries on that same bed. Michael contacted his wife, Dawn, asking her to come immediately. He then placed Annie's body in a large bag and put it in the trunk of his car, where he also had a can of gasoline. He drove with Dawn and their daughter Jade in the back seat for about 100 miles. When they reached a quiet area on the side of the road, Michael took Annie's body out of the trunk, doused it with gasoline, and set it on fire. After making sure the fire was burning well, he quickly returned to the car and drove Dawn and Jade back to his mother's house in Savannah. Dawn's revelation was crucial evidence in the investigation. The police asked Dawn to make a recorded phone call to Michael to talk about Annie's murder. Dawn agreed and called Michael, expressing her concern about the discovery and identification of Annie's body. Michael's response was, "No, they didn't." During the call, Dawn told Michael that blood had been found in their old apartment and that Naval Criminal Investigative Service agents suspected they were involved in a murder. She encouraged Michael to come up with an explanation for the blood. Michael responded, "Okay, we need to work together and come up with a solution." Although he did not admit anything directly, his demeanor showed that he understood the seriousness of the situation. At the end of the conversation, Michael warned Dawn to be careful with her phone calls and assured her that they would work together to resolve the situation. Naval Criminal Investigative Service agents took Dawn to the crime scene to search for any remaining evidence. To protect her identity and ensure her safety as a cooperating witness, they disguised her before arriving at the apartment. Dawn carefully described and demonstrated where Annie's body was and the sequence of events. She pointed out a spot near the wall and baseboard where a significant amount of blood had seeped into the carpet and concrete floor below. Since Michael had moved out, the landlord had replaced and cleaned the carpet several times, which explained the lack of visible evidence. However, when the police used a special chemical on the concrete floor, a large purple stain appeared, indicating the presence of protein and confirming Dawn's account of where Annie's body had been. Despite the blood on the concrete, the Naval Criminal Investigative Service agents had difficulty confirming that the substance was blood, so they continued to search for more physical evidence. Dawn pointed to a nightstand containing a television next to the bed where Annie had been killed. She noted that blood had splattered on the television during the murder, and Michael had said that it needed a thorough cleaning. He had then disposed of the television, possibly selling it rather than throwing away a working appliance, given his frugal habits. Finding the television was difficult, but the agents were determined to find it. At this point, Michael Palin realized that the Naval Criminal Investigative Service was watching him, especially after a phone call with his ex-wife, Dawn. Naval Criminal Investigative Service agents were concerned that Michael might flee or that he might threaten witnesses, harm them. On October 11, 1995, Michael attempted to escape, but was quickly apprehended and taken into custody by police. While Michael Palin was in police custody on suspicion of murder, Naval Criminal Investigative Service agents worked tirelessly to find and interview all the residents of the apartment complex where the murders took place in November 1989. Their efforts were rewarded when they spoke with a neighbor who said he had purchased a television from Michael. Amazingly, the television was still working and in the neighbor's home. The police quickly confiscated the television and sent it to the FBI lab for forensic analysis. This investigation led to a crucial discovery. Analysis found 11 blood stains inside the speaker. These blood samples were later compared to Annie's DNA, providing crucial evidence in the murder case. At this point in the case, Michael's attorney announced that he was willing to plead guilty, but only if the death penalty was removed from consideration. The prosecutor was not pleased with this development, but military law required such a plea bargain to be negotiated at trial. Michael admitted his guilt, recounting the details of his crimes objectively, his account showing no signs of remorse or empathy. As a result, he was convicted and sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 30 years. He was also dishonorably discharged from the Navy. Dawn Breeze, who knew about her husband's crimes and remained silent for more than 6 years, escaped legal consequences thanks to her crucial confession to the Naval Criminal Investigative Service, which greatly aided the investigation. Annie's children now know the truth about their mother's tragic fate and understand that she did not abandon them. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Peter Tobin. Peter Britton Tobin was born on August 27, 1946, in Johnstone, Scotland. He was the youngest of 8 children born to Marjorie and Daniel Tobin. From an early age, Peter displayed an impulsive personality, prompting his parents to send him to boarding school in 1953 when he was only 7 years old. However, this did not work, and he was sent to a reformatory. After completing his time there, he moved to Brighton, England. There, Peter began a relationship with Margaret Mount, a young typist who was attracted to his personality. They married in August 1969, but soon, Peter's ruthless, controlling, and abusive personality manifested itself. Not only that, Peter also became involved in criminal activities. A year later, he was convicted and imprisoned in England for theft and counterfeiting. Margaret decided to divorce him in 1973. Peter then married Sylvia Jeffrey, a 30-year-old local nurse, who was also attracted to his charm. That year, they had their first son, Ian, and a year later, a daughter, Claire, who unfortunately died shortly after birth. Sylvia was devastated by the loss of her child, became a victim of Peter's abuse, and decided to leave in 1976, taking their young son with her. Years later, when he was in his 40s, Peter was ready for a new romantic relationship. This time, he chose Kathy Wilson, a sensitive, naive, and impressionable 16-year-old girl. This made it easy for Peter to start a relationship with Kathy. The two moved in together, and soon after, their son, Daniel, was born. They married in 1989 and moved to Scotland. This was a difficult time for Kathy. Her husband was controlling, preventing her from going out and becoming increasingly violent. Eventually, Kathy bravely decided to run away with her son in the late 1990s. Kathy's departure brought out the worst in Peter. After Kathy left, Peter met a gentle girl named Vicky Hamilton. Vicky was born in Scotland in 1976 and was the second child of Michael and Janet Hamilton. She had 3 siblings, Sharon, Lee, and Lindsay. However, arguments arose between Peter and Vicky and they quickly divorced. Vicky, Lee, and Lindsay lived with their mother and moved to South London. Sharon still lives in Bath, but this did not prevent Vicky and Sharon from maintaining the same close relationship as before. The evening of February 10th was cold and snowy. On a hangout with Sharon, Vicky checked her fare and went over the bus route with Sharon. They hugged goodbye. At the bus stop, while eating a bag of chips, Vicky met Peter. He pulled Vicky into his car, raped her, and then killed her. When Vicky failed to visit her mother's house, and there was no news of her, her family began to search for her. They reported her disappearance to the police. As the police investigated the case, Vicky's image became prominent across Scotland, and the search for her became one of the largest in the country's history. The runaway theory was reinforced on February 21, 1991, when Vicky's purse was found near the main bus station in Edinburgh. It was, in fact, a false clue planted by Peter to throw investigators off track. The attempt was successful, sending the investigation off track. Detectives spent 2 months searching London unsuccessfully. It was then revealed that Vicky's mother had died. Over the next 10 years, Vicky's family and townspeople continued to pursue the case, but with more than 7,000 names on file, nearly 4,000 statements taken, some 500 documents and 380 potential physical evidence, all to no avail. The case was eventually dropped. The next young woman to have Peter's misfortune was Dinah McNichol, an Essex native with a brother and 3 sisters. Her father was a jazz musician and her mother had died in a car accident many years earlier. At 18, Dinah was a kind, cheerful girl and a great friend. She had just graduated from high school and had high hopes for the future. She was torn between taking a year off to travel or going to college, but she was undecided. On the first weekend of August 1991, Dinah attended a music festival in Hampshire. There, she met a boy named David Tremlett. They quickly fell in love. On Sunday, August 4th, they spent the night together in a tent. The next day, Dinah helped him take down the tent and they agreed to each hitchhike home. As they were both tired, Peter showed up and offered to give them a ride. David got out of the car first, and Dinah saved Peter's number before parting ways. Alone with the strange driver, the girl was about to face a real nightmare. On Monday, August 5, 1991, he did the same to her as he had done to Vicky. Dinah's scarf became a crime tool. After the crime, Peter withdrew money from Dinah's account at ATMs in Hampshire and Sussex. When Dinah's family saw the withdrawals from her account, they immediately suspected something was wrong. They knew she had carefully saved every penny and planned to use it for travel or education. As the days passed, the family lived in fear and uncertainty, which was the worst thing. Although no one said it, everyone believed that something terrible had happened. If Dinah were still alive, she would have returned home or called to explain her absence. As for Peter, he left Margate without saying goodbye or explaining anything. In 1993, he settled in Hampshire, renting a flat in Leek Park, saying he wanted to be closer to his son. On August 4, 1993, 2 14-year-old girls went to visit Dinah but did not see her. So they asked the neighbors if anyone had seen Dinah, which led to them knocking on Peter's door. Peter invited the 2 girls into his house, ostensibly to wait for Dinah. They saw his friendly 5-year-old son and agreed without suspect Tayan. While the child was asleep, Peter began to torment the 2 girls. He threatened them with a knife and forced them to drink alcohol, then beat and raped them. One of the girls was seriously injured. Fortunately, the child woke up in time and saved them from the same terrible fate as the 2 previous victims. Peter wanted to hide the truth from his son, so he decided to leave the apartment with the child. Before leaving at around 2 a.m., he turned on the gas stove to complete his monstrous plan. However, the 2 girls were lucky to wake up and escape. They went to the police and reported everything that had happened. After that, Peter returned the child to his mother and joined a sect called the Jesus Fellowship under a false name. But the media published his photo, provided by the police, and his face became widely known. With the help of BBC Crime Watch, Peter was finally arrested after 40 days on the run in Brighton. Peter appeared in court on May 18, 1994 and pleaded guilty to sexual assault and indecent assault on 2 young girls. As a result, he was sentenced to 14 years in prison. However, Peter was released in 2014 at the age of 58 without serving the full sentence. After his release, Peter returned to Scotland with the aim of hiding in the same area to avoid being identified as a sex offender. He evaded capture for a long time until 2006. During this time, Peter used a false name and posed as a homeless person. He sought refuge at St. Patrick's Cathedral in Glasgow. Under the name Peter McLaughlin, Peter approached a charity couple from the church group, Dennis and Katie Curran. Katie still felt uneasy about Peter despite his frail appearance. On the other hand, having been raised Catholic, Peter felt comfortable in the church. He begged there, which helped him gain sympathy from the parishioners. This gave Peter the freedom to move around unnoticed and provided him with an ideal hiding place. Here, Peter met Angelica Kluck, a 23-year-old girl from Poland. She came to Scotland in the summer of 2006 to work and pay for her language lessons. Angelica was living in the rectory of St. Patrick's Church and doing cleaning work. Peter took an immediate liking to Angelica and convinced her to help him with various tasks. On Sunday, September 24, 2006, Angelica helped Peter paint a shed. Some parishioners saw them together. But unexpectedly, Peter attacked Angelica at the back of the chapel. Leica Brown, 47, and her husband, Andrew, 46, were at home when they heard a woman screaming through an open window. Leica described the scream as a short, loud sound, like someone being forcibly restrained. The scream made her nervous and she got up from her chair, but when she got to the window, she couldn't see anything. Hours passed and the parishioners noticed that Angelica was no longer there. That was when Dennis and Katie quickly reported the unusual disappearance to the police. The police immediately began investigating and interviewed every member of the community. During these interviews, it was discovered that the last person anyone saw with Angelica was Peter, albeit under the guise of a homeless. He eventually became the prime suspect and the police came to question him, but found no evidence. The investigation continued. Peter knew that it was only a matter of time before they found the body and traced it back to him, so he fled to London. By this time, Detective David Swindle had joined the investigation and began to suspect that this might not just be a disappearance. Everything they found, as well as the testimonies they gathered, made him think that Angelica was unlikely to be found alive. Finally, on September 29, 2006, authorities discovered the body in the chapel. This news shocked British society, especially because of the location chosen by the perpetrator to hide the body. Looking at the injuries sustained by the girl, Detective David suspected that the perpetrator was not acting for the first time. However, there was more news to come. The DNA found at the crime scene and on the victim's body matched the data in the United Kingdom's National Criminal Intelligence Database. That's when they learned that the man they were looking for was Peter Tobin, whose fingerprints were also found at the crime scene. The first step for the authorities was to publish his photograph in the media. His image was also sent nationwide for distribution and the Scottish police contacted the Metropolitan Police, initiating a search throughout the United Kingdom. Meanwhile, Peter, who was in London, tried to hide in a place where he believed he wouldn't be sought. He went to a hospital, pretending to have heart problems, claiming to have chest pain and weakness on the left side of his body. He identified himself as a plumber and called himself James Kelly. He was examined by Dr. Nick Lasso, who conducted several tests. However, something in his demeanor and behavior made the doctor uncomfortable. Initially, he avoided eye contact, which was unusual for a patient. Then, when the tests didn't reveal any physical reasons for the pain he claimed to be experiencing, the doctor became suspicious. His suspicions were confirmed by a nurse who recognized Peter from a photograph circulating in the media. As a result, both the nurse and the doctor contacted the police. This phone call changed the entire dynamic of the investigation. On September 30th, police officer Alan Murray was dispatched to the hospital in London. Peter was taken to a room and Alan went to talk to him. He was immediately arrested. Although initially, he was charged only with a violation of the sex offender registry, this thing allowed the officers to buy time to prepare a criminal case against him. Evidence gathered by the police team led by Detective David led to Peter's trial for the crimes committed against Angelica in late March 2007. Despite all the evidence against him, Peter denied committing any violent acts against the young woman. However, in an attempt to shift blame for the rape, he claimed that they engaged in consensual sexual activity. Peter also denied providing false information to the police and hospital staff. After 6 weeks of legal proceedings, his lies and manipulations proved futile as he was found guilty and sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 21 years. Detective David and his team suspected that there were more mysteries to Peter's story. During the trial, the detectives further investigated Peter's life, gathered more evidence and built a profile with the cooperation of various law enforcement agencies. To avoid affecting the case involving Angelica, they chose to carry out their work discreetly and carefully. The joint police investigation was called Anagram. Investigators identified links between the disappearances and locations that Peter had visited. The investigation revealed 2 exact links, one in Bathgate and one in Margate. A search was then carried out at Peter's old house on the coast, and they found a knife with traces of DNA hidden in the attic. However, no other findings were made at the location. Investigators then visited the house where he lived in Margate and established that he was a dangerous serial offender. A search of the house revealed a secret grave in the garden that he had created for his son. Investigators dug up a sand pit in the garden and found the body of a woman. Further searches at the same location uncovered another body. A woman's handbag was found at the crime scene and was collected for DNA analysis. As well as identifying the 2 victims, the handbag was also analyzed. Although the handbag clearly contained DNA, there was no match in the National DNA database. However, on June 1, 2007, investigators found a DNA match to Peter's fingerprints. This was a vital lead, and they decided to pursue this line of investigation. On November 14, 2007, the authorities confirmed that one of the bodies was that of Vicky Hamilton, who had gone missing at the age of 15. Her family had waited 16 years for any information about her. They later identified the second body as that of 18-year-old Dinah McNichol, who was hitchhiking home after attending a concert. On September 1, 2008, the Crown Prosecution Service charged Peter with Vicky's murder, leading to his trial. When Vicky's father, Michael, saw Peter, he was restrained by the police, as at that point he just wanted Peter to know that he was there to defend his daughter's honor and remember her. Peter faced sentencing after a month of trial on December 2, 2008, when he was convicted of Vicky's murder and sentenced to life in prison. A year later, in December 2009, Dinah's trial took place. On December 16, due to the defense's failure to provide evidence to exonerate his client, the jury found Peter guilty of Dinah's murder. As a result, he was given an additional life sentence. 5 months before his trial, a report on November 22, 2007, stated that Peter Tobin had been attacked by fellow inmates in prison, but he only suffered minor injuries. During the investigation, Peter Tobin also confessed to a total of 11 murders. Peter died in hospital on October 8, 2022. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Anupama Gulati. Anupama, who lives with her husband and 2 children, was born and raised in Dehradun, but her parents and brother were often worried because they could not reach her on the phone. Since her family used to call her frequently, this loss of contact worried her family. Anupama's brother, Sujin Pradhan, decided to call Anupama's husband, Rajesh Gulati, whom she had been married to since 1999, to ask about his sister. However, every time Sujin Pradhan called, Rajesh would say that Anupama was either busy or had gone on a business trip. This went on for about 2 weeks. During this time, Anupama contacted her brother via email, informing him that she was completely fine and very happy with her husband and 2 children. This reassured her family. However, when they continued to be unable to reach Anupama on the phone, her parents asked Sujin Pradhan to go to Dehradun and meet Anupama. On December 12, 2010, when Sujin Pradhan went to Rajesh's house, Rajesh greeted him unfriendly and said that Anupama was elsewhere and he could not meet her right away. On the other hand, Sujin Pradhan tried to break into Rajesh's house, leading to heated arguments between the two. However, Rajesh did not allow Sujin to enter the house. When Sujin asked Rajesh about Anupama, Rajesh did not provide a satisfactory answer. Sujin decided to go to the nearby police station and filed a missing report for his younger sister, Anupama Gulati. In the report, he also said that he was trying to enter the house but was prevented by Rajesh. The police found the case suspicious and went to Rajesh Gulati's house. When Rajesh saw the police with Sujin, Rajesh tried to remain calm. The police asked Rajesh about Anupama, but Rajesh did not answer directly and tried to distract them. However, the police soon discovered Rajesh's cunning and decided to conduct a full search of the house. During the search, the police noticed a closed room. When the room was opened, there was nothing unusual except a large freezer. The police found the presence of a freezer very strange because such appliances are commonly used in large shops and restaurants. The police wondered why Rajesh would buy such a large freezer for his small family, but he just kept quiet. The police decided to open the freezer to investigate and found many small black bags inside. When they opened one bag, they discovered pieces of meat and then took out some more envelopes. The surprise came when they found a human skull in one of these envelopes. Rajesh Gulati then confessed to the police that the pieces were the body of his wife, Anupama. He broke down in tears and narrated the story. After his confession, the police arrested Rajesh and took him to a local court. There, he was remanded in custody for 5 days. During further investigation, the police discovered a surprising piece of information. Rajesh explained that he had met Anupama at Delhi University, where they both studied and got to know each other. They soon developed feelings for each other and started falling in love. Initially, they kept their relationship a secret from their families, but later decided to go public and asked for permission to get married. Both families agreed and they had a grand wedding in 1999. After marriage, Rajesh's career grew rapidly, and he found a job in a large company in the US. Rajesh and Anupama moved to the US so that he could work as a software engineer. They were living comfortably now, and they had bought a house, which meant that their finances were stable. However, after a few months, Anupama started feeling lonely because Rajesh often went to work every day and she had to stay home alone. During her boredom, Anupama often contacted a close friend of Rajesh's. Later, Rajesh found out that Anupama had become close friends with a close friend of his. Rajesh felt uncomfortable knowing that Anupama and his friend were talking on the phone frequently. This caused many arguments between them. Rajesh asked Anupama many times to stay away from his friend, but she did not listen. This made the situation worse in their home. However, in 2006, Anupama gave birth to twins, and the birth of a daughter and a son brought happiness and harmony to the family. While living in the US, Rajesh and Anupama enjoyed a fairly comfortable life. However, that was completely disrupted in 2007 and 2008 when the US fell into an economic recession, leaving many unemployed. Rajesh, after trying to keep his job for a while, also fell into unemployment. To sustain the family, Rajesh used his savings, but as the situation could not last forever, the savings eventually ran out. At that time, Rajesh had no choice but to sell his house in the US. After selling the house, Rajesh decided to return to India with his family. However, Anupama continued to keep in touch with Rajesh's friends over the phone, and this caused a major argument that led to a conflict between Rajesh and Anupama. The arguments escalated and the couple took the matter to the family court. The court eventually decided that Rajesh would provide Anupama with 20,000 rupees per month to meet their expenses. Thereafter, Rajesh and Anupama lived together in a rented flat for a few months in a place called Governor. After some struggle, Rajesh got a job in a big company in Kolkata, about 990 miles away from his home. For the sake of his job, Rajesh had to leave his wife and 2 children and start a new life in Kolkata. In Kolkata, around 2009, Rajesh met a married woman who was suffering from an unhappy marriage. Her husband was not good and often abused her. When Rajesh heard the story of this woman, he felt sympathy for her, and gradually, the two became close friends. Gradually, their friendship developed into love. After some time, they decided to marry each other secretly at a temple in Kolkata, without informing any of their family or friends. Rajesh returned to his normal routine after his second marriage. He maintained regular contact with his first wife, Anupama, went to work daily, and kept his second marriage a secret from everyone. However, Anupama noticed changes in Rajesh's behavior and suspected that he was involved with another woman in Kolkata. But she was unaware that Rajesh had actually remarried. The couple continued to argue over this issue, and their relationship became so strained that Anupama started thinking about divorce. However, Rajesh successfully convinced Anupama, and they did not go through with the divorce. But when Rajesh failed to pay Anupama the court-ordered maintenance of 20,000 rupees. These financial disputes finally reached a boiling point on October 17, 2010, when Rajesh and Anupama had a huge argument. Rajesh becomes enraged and violently pushes his wife, Anupama, causing her head to hit the corner of the bed. As a result, she starts bleeding profusely. Initially, Rajesh is shocked, but moments later, he lifts a pillow from the bed and uses it to smother Anupama. However, unbeknownst to Rajesh, Anupama is already deceased. Rajesh then frantically searches for a place to hide his wife's body, aware that his children will soon return home from school. With time of the essence, he moves Anupama's body to the second bathroom in the house and locks the door. As he tries to devise a plan to dispose of the body without arousing suspicion, his children arrive home from school and ask about their mother. Rajesh fabricates a story, telling them that their mother suddenly left for Delhi. Rajesh's children believe their mother, Anupama, had gone to visit their grandparents in Delhi. However, Rajesh had other plans. While the children were in school, he went to the market and purchased several items, including a deep freezer, an electric chainsaw, a stone cutter machine, and small black envelopes. When Rajesh brought these items home, he hid them in a separate room. When the children left for school the next day, Rajesh began the gruesome process of dismembering Anupama's body with an electric saw. He closed all the doors and windows to block out the noise. According to Rajesh's statement, Rajesh cut Anupama's body into 72 pieces. He then placed each piece into black bags and carefully stored the bags in the deep freezer to prevent the smell of the deceased from spreading. This process took Rajesh several days to complete. During this time, Rajesh continued to deceive Anupama's parents and brother by making excuses whenever they called, unaware of the horrific events unfolding at his residence. Rajesh took steps to cover up Anupama's disappearance by making excuses to their neighbors and telling their children that their mother had traveled to Delhi. He also had access to Anupama's email account, which allowed him to maintain communication with Sujin Pradhan, Anupama's brother, making it seem as though Anupama was still alive. Following the murder, Rajesh took the children on a weekend trip to Mussoorie in Uttarakhand. During the trip, he would collect 2 or 3 envelopes from the fridge containing pieces of Anupama's body and dispose of them in the forests or gorge along the way. This revelation shocked everyone, and the police began searching the areas where Rajesh claimed to have disposed of Anupama's remains. After an extensive search, the police found some black bags containing body parts in the surrounding forests and gorge. Based on this evidence, Rajesh Gulati was arrested and sent to jail. Rajesh Gulati's twin children were sent to Delhi to live with Anupama's brother, Sujin Pradhan. A court had granted Sujin official custody of the children on March 7, 2011. Rajesh Gulati's father, Satyapal Gulati, appealed this decision but was unsuccessful. On November 3, 2012, the court dismissed his appeal and confirmed that Chari would retain custody of the children. Evidence provided by the police revealed the horrific nature of the crime. Rajesh Gulati had brutally murdered his wife and then cut her body into 72 pieces. After a 7-year trial, Rajesh Gulati was found guilty and sentenced to life imprisonment on September 1, 2017. He was also ordered to pay a fine of 1.5 million rupees. The court ordered that 70,000 rupees of the fine would go to the state treasury, while the remaining amount would be deposited in the names of the twin children. The children would have access to this money only after they came of age. Rajesh Gulati was sentenced in a lower court, but he appealed this decision in a higher court in 2018. However, there has been no ruling on his appeal yet, resulting in his prolonged imprisonment. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Shannon Christian. Hugh Christopher Newsom Jr., commonly known as Christopher, was born on September 21, 1983 in Knoxville, Tennessee, to Mary and Hugh Newsom in a large, loving family. As the youngest child, he was doted on by his family. Christopher was an athlete as a youngster, particularly excelling at baseball during his school years. His coach believed he had a bright future in the sport, but a serious injury and lengthy recovery ended his promising athletic career. Christopher was a man of many talents. In addition to being an excellent artist and guitar player, he was skilled in carpentry and had knowledge of cars and motorcycles. As a young man, Christopher dreamed of becoming a mechanic, but he ended up spending much of his time on his passion for carpentry. After graduating from high school, Christopher attended the University of Tennessee, where he studied hard and became one of the top students. Shannon Gail Christian was born on April 29, 1985, in Nagdoy, Texas, the youngest of 2 children born to Dina and Gary Christian. She grew up with her older brother, Chase, and the two had a close relationship. In 1997, the family moved to Knoxville, Tennessee, where the children attended local schools and their parents started a small business. At home, Dina conducted individual therapy sessions. Shannon was an outgoing and kind girl who shared her mother's interest in psychology. After graduating from high school, she studied sociology at the University of Tennessee and worked part-time to save money for a car. On her 21st birthday, her family helped her buy the silver Toyota 4Runner of her dreams. In 2006, when Shannon was 21 and Christopher was 23, they met through mutual friends at college. It was love at first sight and they quickly became attached. After only a month, Christopher introduced Shannon to his parents and expressed his future intentions to her. Shannon reciprocated by introducing Christopher to her family, and he was warmly welcomed. In October 2006, an important family dinner was held, attended by both parents and siblings. Discussions revolved around Shannon and Christopher's deep feelings for each other, their plans to get married after graduating from college. Everyone was happy and full of hope for the future, unaware of the tragedy that was about to happen to their family. On January 6, 2007, Shannon and Christopher were invited to a mutual friend's birthday party. That Saturday, Shannon went to a beauty salon to prepare for the celebration, parking her car in a nearby underground garage where they planned to meet. However, Christopher arrived late, leading to a small argument between them because they were late for the event. Shannon and Christopher's friends were worried when the couple missed the party. Normally, they were very responsible people and would not miss an event without notice. People tried to contact them by phone but were unsuccessful. In this situation, Shannon's best friend called her mother several times late at night to check on her, but also received no response. The next morning, Shannon's mother, Dina, noticed that her daughter had not returned home. She was not too worried at first, thinking that Shannon might have stayed at Christopher's house after the party or gone straight to work because she had a shift on Sunday. However, Dina's worries increased when she saw several missed calls from unknown numbers in the middle of the night. When she called back, she was informed that Shannon and Christopher had not attended the birthday party and could not be reached. This caused Dina to panic, thinking that something bad had happened to her daughter. Neither Shannon nor Christopher answered their phone calls. Christopher's parents were also surprised, thinking that he was at Shannon's house. The situation became even more worrying when they discovered that Shannon had not gone to work. Both sets of parents immediately called the police, but the response was lukewarm. The police thought that Shannon and Christopher might have wanted some time alone and could not be tracked down. They also followed protocol to only consider an adult missing after 24 hours of no contact. For Shannon and Christopher, however, those 24 hours were crucial. Their parents and friends searched frantically for them. They contacted everyone they knew, checked hospitals, distributed flyers, and used social media to find information. However, no leads emerged. Shannon was last seen at the hair salon on Saturday, when she only talked about an upcoming party. On Monday, January 8th, the police began searching for Shannon and Christopher. By this time, thanks to the efforts of family and friends, the whole city knew about their disappearance. A railway worker discovered badly damaged human remains on an embankment along the tracks. The bodies were in a terrible state, with multiple injuries and burned with a flammable liquid. The police cordoned off the area and investigated, but found no significant clues. After being photographed, the remains were taken to the morgue for an autopsy and an attempt at identification. Although this would be difficult due to the extensive damage to the body, the autopsy revealed that the victim was a young man who had been brutally murdered. He had suffered multiple serious injuries before his death, including losing most of his teeth due to beatings. He had been shot 3 times, twice in the back and once fatally in the head. Evidence also suggested that he had been raped multiple times by at least 3 different attackers. Police identified the victim as Christopher, a young man who had recently gone missing, based on his physical appearance. They contacted the Newsom family to obtain a DNA sample for confirmation. The DNA results eventually confirmed that it was Christopher. Meanwhile, the search for Shannon continued. Although devastated by the news of Christopher, the Shannon family remained hopeful that she was alive. Shannon's last cell phone signal was detected in a dangerous area of Knoxville where neither of them frequented, suggesting they may have been coerced into going there and that Shannon may still be held in the area. Shannon's Toyota 4Runner was found abandoned in a deserted alley. The car was in such bad condition that her parents barely recognized it. It was dirty, scratched, had a broken light, and flat tires. Shannon's personal belongings were gone, replaced by cigarette butts and a damaged car seat. The driver's seat was pushed back, suggesting the last driver was a large man. An envelope with the address 2316 Chipman Street was found between the seats. A witness reported seeing 4 black men driving the SUV on Saturday night. Fingerprints on the envelope led police to Lamarcus Davidson, a man with a criminal record. His home was in a remote industrial area. When no one answered, police forced their way in, hoping to find Shannon alive. Inside the house, police found Shannon's personal items, including a wallet and stuffed toys, along with headphones and Christopher's baseball cap. They also found a bloody knife and torn, bloody women's clothing. Shannon's body was found in the house's trash bin, wrapped in dirty bed sheets and 5 trash bags, in a fetal position. Experts estimate she died in the early morning hours of January 8th. This suggests that if police had started searching immediately after receiving the missing person report instead of waiting 24 hours, Shannon could have been saved. The condition of Shannon's body shocked even experienced forensic experts. Her entire body was covered in bruises, scratches, cuts, and cigarette burns. Injuries to her genitals, mouth, and throat suggested she had been sexually assaulted by multiple men. Shannon also had severe head injuries and internal bleeding in her abdomen, possibly from being kicked. The attackers brutally tortured her by stabbing her multiple times. They tried to erase her DNA by pouring bleach on her, especially her wounds and private parts, and even forced her to drink bleach. They then wrapped her in a garbage bag, stuffed her in a trash can, and covered her up. She slowly died of suffocation and blood loss, unable to escape or call for help. 5 suspects have been identified in the murders of Shannon Christian and Christopher Newsom. Lamarcus Davidson, the main suspect, was immediately sought. Police are also looking for Eric Boyd, another suspect in connection with the crime scene. Eric was arrested on January 11th and cooperated with the investigation, claiming his innocence. He revealed where Lamarcus was hiding and led police there. He was arrested without resistance. When he was arrested, he was wearing the shoes of the deceased victim. During questioning, Lamarcus tried to minimize his role by claiming to be the victim. He said Shannon and Christopher had come to his house to buy drugs but had gotten into an argument with an acquaintance of his. He claimed he had left to avoid involvement and the violence that had occurred in his absence. Subsequent interviews revealed 3 more people involved: Davidson's friend George Thomas, LaTalvis Cobbins, and Vanessa Coleman, 18. The 5 suspects were arrested and held separately for questioning. They blamed each other, inadvertently revealing details of the crime. From their fragmentary statements, police were able to reconstruct the sequence of events and the roles each person played in the crime. Lamarcus, a newly paroled man, was having financial difficulties. He had started dealing drugs and needed a car to make deliveries. He decided to steal a car from an underground parking lot without security cameras and went there with his accomplices. Unfortunately, Shannon and Christopher were in the parking lot at the time and were arguing. The gang decided to kidnap them so as not to leave any witnesses. They held them at gunpoint and put them in the trunk of the car. The couple were taken to Lamarcus's house, where they were brutally beaten and raped. After midnight, Christopher was forced into the trunk of the car, naked and barefoot. He was taken to the train tracks, forced to walk on gravel, and shot twice in the back and once in the head. His body was then doused with flammable liquid and set on fire to destroy the evidence. After attacking Christopher, the gang returned to the house, where Shannon was still tied up. The next day, she was subjected to brutal torture, causing severe injuries to her entire body. They eventually doused her with bleach and stuffed her into a plastic garbage bag while she was still alive, causing her to slowly suffocate. It is unclear when Vanessa Coleman joined the group. She claimed that she was forced to participate in the crimes. However, Eric pointed out that Vanessa was Lamarcus' girlfriend and participated willingly, even taking Shannon's jewelry and phone. The investigation determined that Lamarcus Davidson, born in 1981, was the leader of the group and the main instigator of the brutal acts. Lamarcus attempted to deflect blame and minimize his role, while placing the blame on the dead victims. Lamarcus was convicted of 40 counts, including assault, kidnapping, robbery, and premeditated murder. The jury unanimously decided to sentence Lamarcus to death for his brutal acts. LaTalvis Cobbins, born in 1982, initially faced the death penalty for torture, assault, and participation in the murder. He was eventually sentenced to life in prison without parole. George Thomas, born in 1983, was also sentenced to the same sentence for similar crimes, with no chance of parole. Eric Boyd cooperated with the investigation and helped capture Lamarcus, and was sentenced to 18 years in prison. The victim's family said the sentence was too lenient. Vanessa Coleman, the only woman involved in the atrocities, was sentenced to 53 years in prison. In 2011, the case took a surprising turn when the presiding judge resigned due to drug addiction, calling his ability to judge into question. The verdicts from the previous 2 years were overturned, leading to a retrial, including the case of Christian and Christopher. A new judge was appointed to retry all 5 defendants. As a result, Lamarcus was still sentenced to death. LaTalvis continues to serve life without parole. George was sentenced to life with the possibility of parole after 51 years. Vanessa had her sentence reduced from 53 years to 35 years. Her appeal in 2014 was rejected, and her request for parole in 2017 was also denied. In 2020, the parole board decided that she must continue serving her sentence until at least April 2032. Eric Boyd's case took a significant turn. Initially, he received a shorter sentence for cooperating with investigators. However, new evidence later proved his involvement in the assaults and deaths of both victims. At his retrial, his accomplice George testified against him, revealing previously unknown details about Eric's role. As a result, Eric was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. George, who originally faced the possibility of parole after 51 years, had his sentence reduced by 15% for his testimony, provided he maintains good behavior. Eric's attempts to appeal his new sentence were unsuccessful, and he is currently incarcerated at the Bledsoe County Correctional Complex. Lamaricus continues to be held at the maximum security Riverbend institution as he awaits execution. The case had a profound impact on the public and legal system. It received extensive media coverage and resulted in the passage of 2 new laws. The first law was designed to protect victims from attempts to defame them or shift blame onto them during trials. This legislation was a direct response to the defense team's strategy, which falsely portrayed the murdered students as drug users and thrill seekers in a dangerous area. These baseless accusations caused significant distress to the victims' families. The second law removed the requirement for a judge's signature on a unanimous jury verdict. If this law had been in effect during this case, it could have avoided the need for retrials and sentence reviews. The house at 2316 Chipman Street, where the young couple was tortured, was demolished in the fall of 2008. A memorial was built there to honor Shannon Christian and Christopher Newsom. In Christian's memory, a golf tournament and a charitable foundation were established to support violence victims. Similarly, a foundation in Newsom's name was created, hosting annual memorial baseball tournaments at Halls Park and offering a scholarship named after him, as he was a student and former baseball player. Initially, the media misrepresented details of the case, whether accidentally or intentionally, despite the public outcry and widespread attention. Many people believe that differences in reporting and delays in coverage were racially motivated because the victims were white and the perpetrators were African American. However, the head of the Association of Criminal Writers and Editors remarked, "I can't confidently say that this case would have gotten more attention if 5 white criminals had been accused of similar crimes against 2 black individuals." Moreover, the Knoxville police chief confirmed that there was no evidence suggesting that these crimes were racially motivated. Hi there, investigators. It's time to uncover the truth behind another case. The case of Frank Spencer. Frank Spencer was born on November 10, 1965, in Bloomsburg, Pennsylvania. His father was Cyrus, and his mother was Melina Spencer. Since childhood, Frank loved active games and sports, which helped him maintain a healthy body and mind. When he was in high school, he demonstrated his special ability on the wrestling team and was recognized as an excellent member. Frank had a strong ambition in business and wanted to continue the family business. So, after graduating from high school in 1984, he attended a local university and completed his course in 1988. After his father passed away, Frank became the owner of Spencer's Auto Parts. The year 1997 marked an important event in Frank's life. It was the year he met Maria. The two of them were attracted to each other at first sight. Maria was known for her hot temper and daring personality, which intrigued Frank. Frank's friend Paul remembered that Frank had always liked strong and wild people. And he was a bit like that too. When Frank and Maria met, they had a great start. However, not everyone was happy with the relationship. Maria's parents, in particular, had mixed opinions about Frank. They believed that Frank was not the right man for their daughter. Furthermore, there were rumors that Frank's father had been involved in a gang and was even a hired criminal. Maria's father did not have a good impression of Frank. He even tried to prevent their marriage for a while. Frank's family was also not happy with Frank's choice. So, Frank and Maria decided to run away and rent a separate apartment to get away from their families. After a while, Frank's family and Maria's family were forced to accept their relationship. Family life gradually returned to normal. Maria and Frank got married and had 2 children, a boy and a girl. They then moved to a new house. During this time, Frank owned an auto parts business and sponsored race cars. He worked hard to provide his family with everything they needed. For Frank, his children were the top priority and driving force in his life. Maria initially tried to manage the housework and take care of the children. However, later, despite having a law degree, she became the coach of her daughter's soccer team. Her friends said that, unlike her husband, she was not really interested in the marriage. She seemed to be uninterested in work and family responsibilities. What worried her most was the financial issue. She liked to spend what Frank earned. Maria Spencer had a cold personality, especially towards the children. This caused many problems in her marriage. Her husband was frustrated with her selfishness and eccentricity and expected her to change when she became a mother. However, Maria remained her own person. In 2006, her husband decided to file for divorce because he could no longer stand her inappropriate behavior and constant scandals. He feared for the health of the children because of her unreasonable behavior. After the divorce, the relationship between the two became even more strained. A confrontation over custody was inevitable. Maria wanted to keep the children with her, but her husband did not trust her and believed that she could not take good care of them. However, not everyone agreed with her husband's views. For example, her husband's friend, Ron, believed that both parents were necessary for the children to develop normally. Frank's friend advised him to negotiate with Maria for custody of the children. However, Frank thought he knew better than his friends and continued to demand sole custody. Maria did the same. She also hoped to receive a substantial amount of child support. The conflict between Frank and Maria worsened over time. On several occasions, due to Maria's erratic behavior, Frank had to call the police for help. Maria repeatedly attacked Frank and the children, but not everyone believed this. In 2008, an incident occurred that confirmed Frank's accusations. After a fight with Maria near their children's school, Maria was arrested. The problem stemmed from Maria wanting to pick up her daughter. But Frank's relatives prevented her. The reason was that the two had made another agreement, but Maria changed her mind at the last minute. After the fight, Maria put the child in the car but forgot to fasten the seatbelt. When the police checked her car, they discovered that Maria's actions could endanger the life and health of the child. As a result, Maria got into trouble with the law. She was charged with disorderly conduct and child endangerment. In addition, Frank also accused Maria of stalking him, claiming that she had stalked him on multiple occasions. For this reason, Maria faced an additional charge. Maria could not be convicted of endangering the life of the child because the prosecution could not prove it. Therefore, the authorities decided to drop the charge in exchange for Maria's admission of guilt for disorderly conduct and stalking. Maria agreed and was fined $600. However, this event did not make Maria reconsider her behavior. Instead, she continued to act negatively. Frank's acquaintances and relatives increasingly heard complaints from him about Maria threatening and stalking him. Some of Maria's co-workers also said that she repeatedly mentioned that she hated Frank and was willing to harm him. For this reason, one of her co-workers nicknamed her Black Widow. Frank tried to stay calm and smooth over the rough edges, but Maria wouldn't stop. He kept trying to talk to her, but she wouldn't listen. Frank started recording every conflict so that he would have evidence in case something bad happened. He just wanted to live and work in peace, but Maria took it too far. In 2009, Frank tried to stay positive and eventually met a woman named Julie. However, Maria soon learned about his new relationship. According to Maria, she didn't care that Frank was dating Julie, but what bothered her was that Frank gave Julie access to the children. However, Frank thought that Maria was extremely jealous, and that was the cause of all the trouble. Maria then became very angry. In February 2009, she sent a voice message to Julie, warning her not to go near the children. However, the situation worsened when Maria's father was released from prison after serving 5 years for fraud. His reputation was already bad, and for Frank, this meant more trouble, as he knew Maria's father had a fierce temper. Many believe that Maria had inherited her fierce personality from her father. As Frank became pensive and anxious, his colleagues noticed it too. The first incident that happened after Maria's father Anthony was released was a robbery at Frank's office. Important documents that could affect Frank's divorce were stolen. The next day, Maria called Frank and hinted that she had found something interesting. Frank understood that she was referring to the stolen documents and advised her to return them. At the same time, he also reported the incident to the police. However, it was unsuccessful in proving that someone was involved in the incident. The detectives did not find any traces of the perpetrator. However, everyone suspected that Maria and her father were involved in the crime. The police also considered Maria a suspect. In the end, the investigation of the case was stopped. However, thanks to the intervention of the police, Maria returned the stolen documents to the owner. It is likely that these documents did not contain any important information that could be used in court. The situation between Frank and Maria continued to escalate. Frank's patience was at its limit after Maria repeatedly threatened him on social media. This was because Frank's children were still in contact with his new partner, Julie. Julie, on the other hand, remained calm and balanced, enjoying her time with Frank and his children. She tried not to interfere in Frank and Maria's complicated relationship. However, Frank was extremely angry that Maria had neglected her parental responsibilities. The arguments between the two continued until 2010. At that point, Frank sought the intervention of law enforcement. He asked the police to evaluate Maria's behavior. Despite the threats, Maria insisted that it was just her way of communicating and that she meant nothing reprehensible. Again, Maria's guilt could not be proven because her warnings were vague. In January 2010, a fire brought negativity to Frank. In a strange coincidence, before a romantic trip to the Caribbean islands that he had planned, a fire broke out at Frank's mother's house the night before the trip. Fortunately, no one was injured, but all the property was destroyed by fire and smoke. During this fire, witnesses reported seeing a car driven by Maria, accompanied by neighbors and friends, visiting the house at that time. Maria smiled and watched the fire before leaving. After the fire department put out the fire, a dog owned by one of Frank's children was found dead in the fire. Maria's actions crossed the line, forcing the police to investigate the incident. Unfortunately, there was no clear evidence of arson at the time, and the fire was ruled an accident. Maria then sent Frank a frantic text message, gloating about how karma had caught up with him and how her life had been ruined. She hinted that Frank could face more consequences in the future. Maria also began sending similar messages to Julie, Frank's new partner. When the police failed to act, Maria's aggression escalated. She became so dangerous that she openly threatened Frank and Julie. A few months later, a fire broke out at Julie's house. This time, the situation could have been much worse. Julie was home when the fire broke out, but she was lucky to escape by jumping off the porch. Although she was uninjured, her house was severely damaged and uninhabitable. As a result, Frank invited Julie to move in with him. Frank and Julie feared that this would only make Maria angrier, but they had no other choice. The police are investigating the exact cause of the fire. A similar situation in the past suggests that the fire may have been intentionally set by an individual. Frank and Julie live in a different district than the burned street, so they hope that the police will conduct a fair and impartial investigation. However, once again, there is not much they can do due to the lack of concrete evidence. However, the investigators did not give up. Julie hired private investigators to join the investigation, which pushed the inquiry in a new direction. During the inspection, 2 flares were found on the lawn. One was broken and lying nearby. Investigators also discovered that the fire had spread from the steps leading to the balcony of the house. Finally, after collecting and examining the data, experts determined that the cause of the fire was arson. However, the lack of direct evidence has prevented authorities from identifying the perpetrators. The suspects remain at large and have not been prosecuted for their crimes. The cold summer of 2012 marked a tragic event in the life of the Frank family. In June 2012, Frank and Julie decided to split up, but in reality, it was just a plan to distract Maria. However, this also marked the final farewell of the Frank family. Just a few weeks later, Frank was found dead. On July 3rd, Joe, a close friend of Frank's, decided to visit him because he had not heard from him for a while. Joe and Frank used to take their children out together, and their team was currently in an important series of matches. However, when Frank did not answer the phone, Joe decided to visit him in person. When he arrived at Frank's house, Joe became worried when he saw that the front door was slightly ajar and there were stains near it. His fear was confirmed when he entered the house and saw Frank lying motionless on the floor. Frank's face was serene, as if he had finally found the peace he had been looking for. However, when Joe walked around the body, he saw dried blood in Frank's ear. Without hesitation, Joe called emergency services. As news of the incident spread throughout the county, everyone knew that this was a terrible crime. However, the detectives had to take matters into their own hands to find out who was behind this murder. Investigators discovered many important signs at the crime scene. They found large pools of blood and drag marks on the floor, along with a clear shoe print and bloody gloves in the kitchen. This physical evidence was sent for analysis. The investigation results showed that the bloody shoe print matched the size of the gloves that Maria's father, Anthony, often wore. Furthermore, Maria's DNA was found on the gloves. Since Maria had not lived with the family for over a year, the presence of her DNA on the gloves was unlikely to have happened by accident. All the evidence pointed to the involvement of Anthony and Maria in the case. Both were subsequently arrested. Autopsy results and ballistics analysis revealed that Frank had been shot with 2 different weapons. The first bullet was fired from a .30 caliber sniper rifle as he stood by the front door. Forensic experts found a sniper nest about 115 feet from the house. The bullet went through Frank's arm and chest, causing severe and fatal injuries. The attackers dragged Frank into the house, where they fired a final shot into his head with a .357 Magnum revolver. Frank was already dead at that point. This action was considered an act of revenge, suggesting that the shooter harbored a grudge against the victim. Police speculated that Anthony shot Frank with the rifle. There were also some important clues left behind. Frank's car and dog were missing from the house, implicating Anthony and Maria. A review of traffic cameras showed Frank's car driving away from the victim's house shortly after the crime. However, the driver could not be identified. The car was later found in Sunbury, Pennsylvania, 27 miles from Frank's house and 5 miles from Maria's residence. However, no fingerprints or other evidence were found inside the car. Frank's dog was found 2 days after the crime when it wandered into a wedding in Dufan. Thanks to an electronic chip, attendees realized that the dog had an owner. The dog was later returned to Frank's mother. The fact that Frank had purchased the dog after the fire helped shed some light on the case. During the investigation, detectives discovered that the criminals had taken the dog as they were fleeing the scene. During the time Anthony was stopped, the dog was attracted to the smell of food nearby and escaped. It then wandered into a house where a wedding was being held, where it was found. This helped detectives prove that Anthony's phone was near the venue of the celebration on the day of the crime, even though he claimed to be at home in Harrisburg, 12 miles away. It is possible that Maria was the one who put the dog in the car, but this decision proved to be a mistake. During questioning, Anthony admitted that Frank had asked him for help several times and that he had visited Frank the day before Frank died. This would explain the traces found at the crime scene. However, Anthony could not explain the presence of the pool of blood. His testimony sounded disingenuous. Anthony also confessed that Frank had given him the car to use that same day, apparently to justify his fingerprints at the victim's house. This would indicate that he had been at the crime scene the day before. Searches were conducted at Anthony and Maria's homes to find the murder weapon, but Anthony was a seasoned criminal and knew how to handle weapons. Therefore, neither the rifle nor the pistol was found. Maria also refused to admit her guilt. She assumed that the glove had been accidentally sent to her ex-husband's house, possibly because the children had moved it one day. Eventually, Anthony and Maria were released to go home. However, detectives continued to investigate and collect the evidence needed to solve the case. Meanwhile, Frank's friend Derek Reed tried to talk to Maria at a school football game. During the conversation, Maria confessed that the last thing her husband saw before he died was her face. This statement was strange and curious. The investigation into Frank's death received intense attention from the state attorney general. The attorney general was furious with the indifference of the authorities to Frank's reports and statements. The police also faced numerous complaints of incompetence, and an internal investigation was inevitable. However, the police's negligence in their duties could not be proven. The reason was that much of the information provided by Frank, which the police believed lacked solid evidence, contributed to Frank's tragic death. The public and Frank's relatives were outraged that their petition had not yielded results. Meanwhile, investigators tried to prove the suspect's guilt not only in the crime but also in stalking and other crimes committed before. In 2013, a major interrogation was held. At the same time, Maria and Anthony continued to claim their innocence, denying all 12 charges against them. Their unwillingness to cooperate with the investigation led to charges of providing false testimony. Prosecutors argued that the suspects had arrived at Frank's home together, but they chose not to use their own vehicles to avoid attracting attention. Instead, they fled the scene in Frank's car. By the end of 2014, Maria was recaptured. Meanwhile, Anthony successfully escaped. After being interrogated one last time, Anthony boarded a plane and flew to Colombia. According to the investigation, Anthony's escape was evidence that he was hiding his guilt. For 11 months, Anthony was on the run but was eventually captured in Buenos Aires, Argentina. After being arrested by local police, he fought extradition to the United States but was unsuccessful and was deported back to his home country. In the fall of 2015, Maria's trial began. She continued to deny her guilt and blamed her father. She claimed that she loved Frank and never wanted him dead. However, multiple witnesses came forward to shed light on her true nature, recounting the threats, stalking, and sabotage she had committed. After more than a week of trial, the jury returned a verdict, finding her guilty on all counts, including murder, arson, burglary, perjury, conspiracy, and menacing. Maria was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus 50 years. Witnesses reported that she smiled throughout the trial. Years later, Anthony's trial began. Anthony was furious when he heard his daughter's accusations. He claimed he was only helping her but objected to the use of violence. However, the physical evidence suggested otherwise. Finally, in the fall of 2018, Anthony was convicted of murder, robbery, and arson. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole, plus 45 years. When he was sentenced, the 77-year-old blew a kiss to the prosecutor and the lead detective before cursing at the judge. Years later, Anthony sought to appeal, claiming his defense attorney was ineffective, which led to his conviction. His daughter, Maria, also tried to appeal her case. However, both Maria and Anthony efforts were unsuccessful. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Velma Barfield. Velma Barfield was born in 1932 in Eastover, North Carolina, and grew up in the shadow of the Great Depression. In a poor family of 9 children, Velma's family worked hard on tobacco farms, but life was still difficult. Velma's father, Murphy Bullard, was an outspoken man. Murphy often flew into fits of rage, and Velma claimed that her father physically and mentally abused her and her sisters. Velma's mother, Lily Bullard, suffered from her husband's fiery temper. In their world, love and care were considered luxuries. As a result, Velma and her brothers had a difficult childhood, lacking affection and constantly facing the threat of violence. As a child, Velma noticed a glaring disparity in her finances between herself and her friends. This sparked her first acts of crime. At first, Velma took small amounts of money from her father to buy small items that her classmates liked. However, her stealing gradually became fatter when she stole $80 from an elderly neighbor. When the matter was discovered, her father punished Velma very severely. After that, she gave up stealing. Raised in a Catholic family, Velma found comfort and faith in the Bible. However, as she grew up, the psychological trauma from her past shaped her into a woman with special power. During World War II, the world around her changed rapidly. The war caused her family to face many difficulties. Velma was forced to take responsibility for her life and family early. Her dreams and desires were often hidden behind her primary goal of survival. As Velma grew older, her desire for a better life grew, and she longed to escape her difficult circumstances. At the age of 17, Velma decided to drop out of school. In her search for love and work, she met Thomas Burke, and the two later married, but this marriage brought new difficulties. By the age of 19, Velma had 2 children, a son named Ron and a daughter named Kim. For more than 15 years, the family lived in Parkton, North Carolina. In 1965, Thomas was in a serious car accident and suffered head injuries. To cope with the pain and headaches caused by the injury, Thomas became a heavy drinker and drug addict. This affected his family, especially Velma, who had experienced past trauma due to her father's alcohol abuse. Velma vowed never to let history repeat itself, but she also faced difficulties in her own life. During this time, Velma faced many pressures, including an unhappy marriage, motherhood, and past patterns. Velma tried to find stability by working at a textile factory, but she soon had to quit to deal with health issues. She then had to undergo an emergency hysterectomy. After the surgery, Velma began to suffer from seizures and was prescribed medication. However, the use of seizure medication gradually became a habit, causing her to become mentally impaired. Velma's drinking increased, each step pushing her into a more desperate and out-of-control state. On April 4, 1969, while she and her children were away from home, the house caught fire. Thomas, who was still in the house, died of smoke inhalation. After the fire, Velma and her children moved in with her parents. A few months after her Thomas's death, Velma began a relationship with a divorced man named Jennings Barfield. They married in August 1970. However, their relationship did not last. After an argument, Jennings died of a heart attack on March 21, 1971. Velma returned to her parents' home. Later, Velma's father died of cancer in the summer of 1974. Her mother also suffered from severe stomach pain and was hospitalized. Although she recovered and returned home in August 1974, Velma's mother was hospitalized again due to severe stomach pain. Because her illness was so severe, she died after 2 hours of treatment. Another man Velma was dating was in a car accident and died on December 30th of the same year. Velma's financial difficulties and addiction led to another bad decision. She started forging checks to meet her growing needs. But deception came at a cost, and those around her began to lose faith in Velma. In 1975, Velma was convicted of 7 counts of writing bad checks and sentenced to 6 months in prison. However, she was released after serving 3 months. After her release in 1976, Velma took a job caring for the elderly. She initially worked for 94-year-old Montgomery Edwards and his 84-year-old wife in Lumberton, North Carolina. Montgomery fell ill and died on January 29, 1977. A few weeks later, in February, Montgomery's wife Dolly developed symptoms of the same stomach illness as Velma's mother and died on March 1st. Velma then cared for Record Lee, 76, who had lost a leg. On June 4, 1977, Record Lee's husband, John Henry, began experiencing severe pain and cramps in his abdomen. Doctors attributed his condition to a severe stomach virus. However, he died later that month. Velma then moved in with her new boyfriend, Roland Stewart. While attending a Pentecostal revival meeting in Cumberland County, Roland Stewart suddenly complained of severe abdominal pain. He was rushed to the hospital but could not be saved, dying a few days later. Roland Stewart's relatives were suspicious of his mysterious death. They reported to the police to find out the reason for Roland Stewart's death. An autopsy was ordered. An investigation into Roland Stewart's death was opened. Before the autopsy results were released, Lumberton police received an anonymous phone call, reportedly from Velma's sister, who said that Velma had poisoned Roland Stewart and others. As a result, Velma was arrested for the murder of Roland Stewart. During the interrogation, Velma confessed to poisoning Montgomery and Dolly Edwards, John Henry, her mother Lillian, and her boyfriend Roland Stewart. Velma confessed that she had forged checks to her boyfriend Roland Stewart's account and that he had found out about it, so Velma had mixed rat poison into his beer and tea, and in previous victims Velma had given weed killers containing paraquat and barbiturates. Velma had secretly put these substances into her victims' food or drinks, leading to their deaths. At trial, Velma's defense attorney argued that she was insane, but this was not accepted. Velma appeared cold and emotionless, laughing at the prosecutor and even applauding after his closing speech. The defense attorney attempted to explain that Velma was not a monster but a soul trapped by addiction, and that the difficult circumstances she had experienced since childhood had caused Velma's actions to be beyond her control. The attorney emphasized Velma's mental health struggles as a mitigating factor in Velma's crimes. December 12, 1978. The jury considered the circumstances and decided to sentence Velma to death for murder and causing harm to the victim's family. The verdict was an acknowledgement of the victim's family's irreplaceable loss. A unit for female death row inmates was later established at the North Carolina Correctional Institution for Women. While on death row, Velma quit smoking and expressed remorse. At night, the faces of her victims haunted her dreams, and Velma silently contemplated the crimes she had committed. Velma's appeal was filed with the North Carolina Supreme Court on October 30, 1984. The appeal claimed that she was incompetent at her original trial due to her struggles with drug addiction. However, the court denied her appeal. The day before her execution, Velma instructed her attorney, Jimmy, to withdraw all remaining appeals. She expressed her desire to die with dignity, as allowed by the state of North Carolina. In her final hours, Velma reflected on her life and prayed, finding solace in her faith as she prepared for death. Pastor Billy Graham offered her words of comfort over the phone, saying, "Velma, in a way I envy you because you're going to get to heaven before I do." Velma was executed on November 2, 1984, at the Central Penitentiary in Raleigh. Before her execution, she expressed remorse for the pain she had caused, stating that she was deeply sorry for the pain she had caused and that many families had suffered greatly. She also expressed her gratitude to those who had supported her over the past 6 years, saying that she appreciated the unwavering support of her family, her attorneys, and the kindness of the prison staff, and that she was grateful for their compassion and understanding during this difficult time. For her final meal, Velma chose a simple snack of cheese doodles and a Coca-Cola. She spent her last hours with family members and friends who visited her before her execution. Despite the circumstances, Velma remained calm and at peace. Velma was led to her execution wearing pink pajamas and medical devices attached to her chest, including a stethoscope and heart monitor. She was secured to a gurney with straps at her body and legs, and then wheeled to the execution chamber just before 2 a.m. outside the prison. 2 opposing groups of protesters had gathered. Pro-death penalty supporters were present, and anti-death penalty advocates, who criticized Governor Hunt for not showing compassion and claimed the woman could still contribute positively to society from behind bars. As the execution approached, other inmates demonstrated their anxiety by banging on the windows of their cells in unison. A group of about 80 people who supported capital punishment showed their approval through cheers and applause. 3 volunteers carried out the execution, with a dummy intravenous line ensuring that none knew for certain which of them had administered the fatal dose. Velma's execution took place at 2:15 a.m., just 15 minutes after being given the lethal injection of procan bromide. Those present at the execution reported that she passed away without any apparent suffering. Around 300 death penalty opponents stood nearby in silence, holding candles that they extinguished as the moment of her death approached. After the execution, Velma's body was taken by ambulance to a medical school for use in her previously expressed wish to donate her organs for transplantation. Her burial followed at a small North Carolina cemetery close to the gravesite of her first husband, Thomas Burke. She was 52 years old at the time of her death.